Ted! Hey, Ted, where the hell's the corkscrew?
Okay, no, I thought there was a problem. There's no problems here.
There's never
We're all
problems.
Good. No. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Waffle Press Retrospective. This is not a failed blockbuster special,
That's our annual
but
Halloween.
it also kind of is.
I mean, maybe. Did any of these actually flop? I know there's
one of them definitely did.
Which one?
It's the last one in the official chronology before Freddy vs. Jason.
Oh, okay.
Jason X.
Okay, yeah, you know what? That makes sense.
Jason X is technically a bomb.
Okay. But this is our Halloween special. And I think we've learned from previous years when we decided, hey, let's do franchises, and let's talk about all the Halloween movies in separate individual episodes. We maybe realized that wasn't the right way to approach it. So now we're just going to do a whole franchise at once.
Yeah. Speaking of Halloween, I rewatched Halloween Ends recently.
Yeah?
A movie that has only remained divisive. No one's really grown or distanced himself from it. Everyone kind of planted their flag immediately when that movie came out. I still find it wildly strange, fascinating, oddly emotional, and I love it more and more with each passing day. It's a unique film experience that I frankly will maybe never see again in a slasher franchise.
You gave it 5 stars.
I did do that, and I stand by it. I love that movie with all my heart.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the beauty of the Halloween franchise is that, you know, you get Halloween Kills, which I don't like, and I'm like, what happened there? And then I get Halloween Ends right back to back with it, and I'm like, what happened there? But I loved it this time.
Halloween Kills, a good movie.
I mean, some people do like it.
You know what? Here's something these movies are going to remain divisive, and David Gordon Green is not helping himself by releasing what people are calling the most boringest Exorcist film ever made, which is already is basically a movie dead on arrival, right? Exorcist Believer, great title, and which I think the primary problem I have with all the David Gordon Green Halloween films, of which I am a defender in that I think they're all okay, and I will stand up for the first one he did because I think people have kind of turned around on it, but I do think that's a genuinely solid movie. But the overarching problem is that people don't shut the fuck up in those movies. That they could really benefit from people not talking as much as they do, and I really want to go in and just do a fan edit of just taking out huge chunks of dialogue, because why is that? That's the stuff that gets annoying, you know.
They sort of they say the theme a lot.
Yeah,
you know,
and
that's a problem I have with them.
Yeah,
sure.
That seems based on what I will not. I can't believe anyone actually paid money to see Exorcist Believer. A few people I know have seen it.
Well, look. I have to say now. I think the horror fans have really turned on David Gordon Green, and I think it's because, I think, from what it just as a witness to all of this, having not seen the new Exorcist movie, which I've not heard encouraging things about. It feels like the horror fans got really defensive against him because maybe they think he's a fake horror nerd because he's not from his background isn't in horror. When he started his filmmaking career, he got comparisons to Terrence Malick, and he's every 5 to 10 years he's shifted genres and modes. And I just think people don't like that he's not going to be a horror guy forever. He's going to move on at some point. Maybe sooner than he and Jason Blum expected, unfortunately. I am a David Gordon Green fan. It doesn't mean I've liked everything he's done. But, it's like, I don't know. People were just championing him like 5 years ago, and now he's like enemy of the state. And I just feel that's a little overblown.
I think he's the horror equivalent of, I mean, not Ryan Johnson specifically, but I firmly believe the negative response to Last Jedi got was that people felt fooled by The Force Awakens. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's been my take, is that everyone saw that movie and liked it, and then when they left and their one cynical friend pointed out that was just Star Wars again, everyone felt kind of fooled, and they were ashamed that it was so easy to make them enjoy a Star Wars movie that they came down harder. And I think Halloween 2018 had a similar thing where that movie came out and it had been a while since there had been a good Halloween movie, and it was a real, like, let's bring things back to basics. And I think the response to it was really positive, and a lot of people just went like, it's trying so desperately to be John Carpenter's Halloween. And I'm like, yeah. Like, I don't know. It felt like that was one where people, they were, I don't know. I think people are kind of annoyed, or they felt like everyone else around them had been fooled, but they were smart horror people, so they weren't fooled. They knew that the Halloween 2018 was a hack film in a franchise that otherwise has no hack films in it.
Well, that's the thing, because we did that Halloween retrospective, and you and I ended up kind of turning on the franchise by the end of that.
Yeah.
Even though we did like 2018, that was like kind of like the last one we tacked on at the end.
The mistake was doing all of the films one at a time. That's really what the mistake was. I'll just say
yeah, because it's like, after that and seeing all those making of documentaries, it's like, okay, like, I've talked about how I'm a latecomer to horror, Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm a little defensive of David Gordon Green. Again, someone who has made movies I don't like. But I'm like, like, he could just like these things and move on to other things he likes.
Yeah.
I like the Halloween franchise as a whole. Individual movies, maybe less so. Now, you know what I mean? Like, there's plenty to appreciate there, and as horror nerds, like, these horror nerds are great because they'll defend the fucking most ramshackle, crooked shit. Where they're like, Puppet Master 5 is actually, better than The Godfather, or whatever the fuck.
I mean, like, there might be one or two of those type of takes today, frankly. I
got one in the chamber.
Yeah, but, like, there's these... I'm someone who's, like, I think people just don't know where, like, for horror nerds, like, I know one of my takes is, like, I hate the first Amityville movie. I basically hate all the Amityville movies. But I'm like, 2 is actually good. And I think if you're not in horror, like, that sounds insane, right?
Yes.
A franchise that long, the second one is actually the good one. Like, and, like, because the first movie is, like, kind of a prestige horror film, and I'm like, yeah, but 2's the one that, like, really gets it. And there's horror franchises are really like that. I mean, it's something like, I think Nightmare on Elm Street has a similar vibe where it's a wildly uneven franchise, right? Like, except there are usually defenders, like, each one of those movies is someone's favorite, right? Like, someone somewhere loves at least one, is like, that one's my favorite, except for Freddy's Dead.
No, Freddy's Dead has... I don't know if it's anyone's favorite, but there are plenty of people that are like, no, that one's fun. But Friday 5, or Nightmare 5 sucks. And I'm like, I love Friday 5 because that's an insane film.
Yeah.
It's a genuinely unhinged movie.
5 is just, like, wildly, like, you could tell they were kind of rushing things. Like, that's one of the problems.
Yeah.
Like, it was turning into, like, we got to get one of these out a year type shit, so...
Yeah, but, like, those movies, and we've talked about it before, like, I love all of them except Freddy's Dead and the remake because, like, they're so stylistically inventive, constantly.
Yeah.
Like... There's no other slasher franchise that is constantly that visually expressive and exciting, and the set pieces are, like, nothing you've ever seen before on
But
those
think of
budgets.
it where the like average person is like, yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one's good, right? Like, I mean, that's even the line in Scream, right? Where she says like, yeah, the first one's good, but the rest of them sucked, which is, that's fine for Wes Craven to make that point.
Yeah, Wes Craven's the one guy who's allowed to say that.
But it's like, if you talk to horror nerds, it's like, now it's like 3, 4, and 5 are like where the series really gets its shit together, and then, like, average people are like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, and that is the kind of fascinating, and that's why I am kind of I think the David Gordon Green films, they're as uneven as the Nightmare films, right? In my opinion. Like, I think they are wildly uneven. But when we get 10 years removed and we're rebooting Halloween yet again, which they've already seemed to be talking about doing more Halloween stuff, right? Because, I mean, what you guys gonna
As a TV show.
Yeah. That's can I do my quick pitch for what they should do? Which
Go ahead.
Fucking bring what's her name back? Danielle
Harris.
Yeah, Danielle Harris, and then do like ignore Curse of Michael Myers. Like, fuck that movie. Like, just ignore that shit. Bring Danielle Harris back and just make it like she has the like, because she kind of has like the half of Michael Myers in her, right? Like, so
yeah.
She's like she's half good, half evil, and she's trying to like, I don't know, like make it about her, and Michael Myers can show up occasionally, right? Like, because you can't do a show about Michael Myers, really. I'm sure they'll try, but I don't think you can really do it.
Yeah.
But that would be my pitch, is bringing Danielle Harris back and kind of having her be the lead. But again, to just make somehow the Halloween franchise, which should be the simplest, has the most convoluted continuity of all the slashers.
I know. I also think that's not to... Okay, we're going to talk about Friday the 13th, I swear to God, because there's actually a lot to talk about. But I do think another part of the reason why people dislike the David Gordon Green stuff now is that they're like, well, they felt like forsaken from the rest of the franchise. They're like, no, this is the real sequel stuff. And it's like... Halloween did that like every 2 movies.
Yeah,
I don't know why it's a problem now. Like,
yeah, they do it all the fucking time. Like, that's the most
that's
Halloween
the franchise's thing.
Yeah, it's the most Halloween thing ever. Like, and I honestly would like to see what like an actual attempt to do a sequel to Halloween Ends. Because they very much positioned what's his fuck. Corey Cunningham, as being like the next Michael Myers, and I like that was the I like that David Gordon Green honestly like stripped it back to the like Michael Myers is just the shape, he's just evil, because I feel like that's a much more interesting thing to do with the franchise. So I would like to see how people take that ball and run with it, but but they'll probably just
this
reboot
is
it
the
again.
last thing. I have to say this because we should talk about Friday now. Like, I mentioned all this because I want to share my eventual appreciation for all the fucked up flaws of the Halloween franchise and slasher franchises in general, and to say that like Halloween Ends, like there was, I guess, some version either on the page or like a filmed version even possibly, where I guess like Corey was gonna like walk into the night as the next version of the shape. That was like a rumor going around. And I guess people, maybe some producers who were unhappy at the critical response to Kills and even more so Ends, were like, just fucking make it Michael Myers again.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's...
And I'm not even saying that's the wrong move, just like,
It is what that movie feels like, like that is 100% what the movie kind of just feels like. But I don't know. I think it basically still gets that done, right? Like, you can still
I think the creative struggles are clear, but I do think like Alien 3, it works wonders for me. And I'll say this will be the truly last thing. When we did the Halloween Ends retrospective a year ago, I listened back to some of it, and I called it, like, the last Halloween retrospective we ever do, and you were like, maybe not, like, we'll see what happens, and I was like, I don't care if they reboot it, like, to me, this is the end. I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't worship the franchise. Like, if they make another one that's interesting, like,
Well,
I'm down to talk about it again.
that's the other thing where about horror, where it's like some franchises haven't had a good movie in 20 years, and horror fans will still show up for it, right? Like, when was the last good Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, right? Like,
Oh, people don't want me to answer that.
I mean, people like the remake, right? Like, but even then, that's like from 2003 at this point. Like, that's forever ago. And then, like, think about like Hellraiser, right? Like, there was Hellraiser.
Oh, God.
They did a new Hellraiser like 2 years ago. Like,
Literally 1 year ago. Literally
ago.
last year. Yeah.
And
I think dismissive fans called it Hulu Raiser because it was released on Hulu. Like, it's not that movie's fault. Don't do that.
yeah. Well,
like, I thought it was okay.
I'll say this is the weird thing about horror right now, in my opinion, where people are going like, these sacred cows are being defiled, and I'm like, they've always been like this. Like, it's the moment the Weinsteins got their hands on Hellraiser, it was trash. Like, it's most of these horror franchises go off the rails pretty quickly, right? You know, and it's, I don't know, you're supposed to kind of like line up with the ones you like and kind of stand by them even when they suck, you know? Like, not to be like hidden masterpiece, just being like, yeah, it didn't totally work, but whatever. Like, these aren't ones worth getting upset about, you know?
Yeah. Like, the knives are out right now in a way that it feels like it is new for this sort of genre stuff. Or at least we're seeing it more. We're seeing it more, is what I should say.
I think it's the mainstreaming of horror where it's for the longest time that stuff still used to be kind of like ghettoized of like horror is its own thing, right? Like, and I think the boom of prestige horror has been this real double-edged sword, the elevated horror thing, where people now are trying to, you know, people want to be like, well, no, horror was never, like, elevated horror isn't suddenly better than these other movies, right? Like, you know, there's like a defensiveness going on right now. And
yeah.
I've certainly played into it a little bit, but yeah, and also I think the other thing is that, talking about David Gordon Green, I've mentioned this in the past, that horror has kind of been flooded with people who it wasn't their dream to make horror films, right? Like, they went into Hollywood with other ideas, and now horror is the only genre where you can really get original ideas made. And so it's attracting people who are like, I have all these ideas, I will fit them into a horror context. And I think it's starting to frustrate people a little bit, you know? I think, and like, you know, Ari Aster going on and on about how Midsommar is a metaphor for his breakup, right? Like,
yeah.
And you're like, no, Midsommar is a fucking metaphor for fucked up shit. like horror.
Yeah,
that's not what folk horror is supposed to be. Like, I love Midsommar. Like, I'm a defender of that movie. Like, I really like that movie.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that I get where that frustration comes from with people, where when he comes in, he's like, yeah, guess what? I was using horror as a metaphor. Like, he fucking, like, invented the wheel. And it's like, hey, well, yeah, fucking Nosferatu did that shit. Like, this is what horror has always been. And then to still see someone like, and, you know, I think there was a brief moment where people were like, if, with Jordan Peele getting big and then Halloween 2018 doing money, there was like kind of a brief hope where it's like, maybe now someone will let Carpenter come back, right? That, like, let's give him one more, like this is like, now he's been totally vindicated by history. Someone give him a check, and like that still didn't even materialize, right? And
yeah,
that's true for a lot of the horror guys, and now they're all dying. Like, it's, you know, Romero's gone, Hooper's gone, Craven's gone. Like, it feels like a weird closing the door on an era, and there isn't the sleazy horror films that are like accidental art, right? You know?
Yeah,
There is no like area for someone like Dario Argento, you know? And talk about that with the Suspiria remake, a wildly divisive movie, especially because I think people feel like it kind of, you know, they take it as a personal insult against the original Suspiria. that they feel like the movie thinks it's better than Suspiria, you know.
Mm-hmm. And I really like that remake too. I'm a Guadagnino fan. I loved Bones and All. Like that, I think that's his best movie.
Oh yeah, and then that's like a horror adjacent movie, right? Like
it's him doing Near Dark. It is 1,000% that, which is why I probably responded so strongly.
But guess what? Also, no one showed the fuck up for that movie. Like So,
but I just want to say on
you know,
horror fans are. I love you guys. I am one of you. Mm-hmm. We can be full of it sometimes. Because on the flip side of what we're saying, like, oh, like, the new Suspiria is, like, it's the prestige version, whatever, which is why people get defensive of the old one, which I do still prefer, for the record. I have definitely heard people be like, well, the new one's way better because it has, like, more of a plot or a narrative. Yeah. And it's just like, well, they're doing different things.
Yeah,
the
new Suspiria might as well be an original film, right? Like... It just kind of takes some of the lore of Suspiria and does its own thing with it, which is what you should do with remakes, frankly. And
like if it was called Broken Dance Musical Numbers, people would be like, hey, that's kind of similar structurally to Suspiria. There's a dance academy, there's a murder mystery, there's witches involved, like there's a weird ending, you know? People would be like, oh yeah, that is kind of like Suspiria. And you're right, that's exactly what people should do with remakes.
Yeah. And then
which is not what they did with the remake for Friday the 13th, by the way, but we'll get there.
Hey, we'll get there. Well, that's literally at the end of what we'll be doing.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just horror, it's in a weird place right now, because it feels like it's the last genre, right? Like, it's like
it's the last stand of cinema.
Yeah, the two genres right now are, like, Marvel slop and fucking horror. And I think there's a sort of panic happening around it, which isn't totally unjustified. That the weird, people fear the gentrification of horror almost, right? And because what we have totally lost is the sleaze of horror, and it makes me wonder. Like, I want to know. I feel like we won't know for 10 years. Like, what is going up on Netflix with like no announcement. Some horror movie that is like a secret like masterpiece. You know what I'm saying? Like, like what is going up? Because it's hard. It's so much harder to find them now than even it was back at like peak VHS with direct-to-video horror. And now there's like so much content slop where it's just like the I think the Red Letter Media guys did that video where they just listed all the different movies with Amityville in the title. And and then they show clips from it, and it's literally like someone took like an iPhone and shot something in their parents' basement and just called it Amityville. And it's like we're in like in this weird, you know, like this. I think we're in a real content slop era, right? Like that's just what's going on right now, and I don't know what's next totally, but it's. Yeah, horror's in a weird place. I feel like things are going to bounce back, but it's also brought in a whole new audience of people who you know, when we were growing up with horror, I mean, you came to horror late, like you said, but like our introductions were more like classical horror films, right? Like
the Universal monsters got a lot of play, not just because of the Mummy, the Brendan Fraser Mummy, which did get a lot of play for me as well. Like, you know, you get the VHS for that, and because it's a Universal Pictures production, you get the trailer for all the Universal Monsters stuff. And I remember even some Child's Play in there.
Of course,
that was Universal. The sequels were Universal, I think. Or the first one. I forget. The rights to that are strange.
Yeah, we'll talk about... Horror rights are also fucking insane. We'll get to that.
Yeah, which is like specifically about this franchise. But that was kind of like where I discover it, but I don't really respond to the, like, not the truth of horror or whatever, but like the more intense stuff.
But here's something like I don't know if you had this. Did you have... We've talked about this. I can't remember. I'm sorry I can't remember what you said, but did you ever have the experience of just going to the horror aisle at Blockbuster? Did you ever like do that?
I saw the posters and I got scared, and I never rented a single horror-related thing.
I didn't rent most of them either, but I would go to the horror aisle and just look at the covers.
No, that was not my bag.
Okay.
When I was younger.
Well, because for me, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, like Dracula, Frankenstein, Michael Myers, the alien from Alien, Jason Voorhees, like they're all on the same team as far as I'm concerned. You know, like when I'm a kid, you don't have that grasp of time where you're like, oh, like the 30s horror is so much different than 80s horror, right? Like you don't see that, but like when you're growing up, you're like, these are all the same. This is what horror is. Horror is Dracula. Horror is Jason. Horror is the guy from Scream, who I didn't know his name. Like horror is the Blair Witch. Like they're all the same as far as I'm concerned as a child. And I think that like as that sort of physical media thing started to end, and you don't have like, again, this is me putting these pieces together without watching the movies. Friday the 13th was one of the last ones of a franchise I got to, mainly because of its reputation of sex and violence. But in my head, I'm like, yeah, these are all the same. Like when I'm a kid, they're just like, yeah, this is what horror is. This is my conception of horror. It's these guys. It's the monsters. It's the killers. It's Chucky. Like Chucky was definitely one of them. And I think now you have a new generation coming up where it's like their introduction to horror is like A24 horror, right? Or Blumhouse horror, which is like a very different kind of thing, you know? And they're not like character based as much either. And I'm not saying it's even bad. I just think it's different, you know? I had cousins visit a little while back, and they were like really into horror, but it was like so much different than my idea of horror, you know? Like I was just like, when they would talk about it, and they were really into it, like it wasn't like a bad thing. It was just it was like basically anything that came out in the last 5 years they had seen, right? Like they had seen all of it, including the Terrifier films. And
that's fucking psychotic.
I know, and they're like, Terrifier, man, was so fucked up. Like, they talked about it like that, you know? And they don't, you know, and to me, where it's like, you know, as a kid, I just had it was just different, is all I'm saying. And I think there's a little bit of judgment going on with horror fans who maybe, like, you weren't there, man. You weren't in the trenches of Blockbuster. Like, you didn't.
Yeah,
you
like
don't understand.
Recently,
man.
you just mentioned being annoyed with, like, the Alien 3 stuff, where the nerds are now like, oh, Alien 3 is actually the best sequel. And it's like, we did that already. Like, it's not that exciting to say that.
It's too late.
It doesn't matter
on the team, right? Like, we were the ones defending it for years. Yeah. Now you're here. Like, it's fine. You're welcome, but like, you're not doing anything clever anymore. Like, you don't pat yourselves on the back about it, I guess. And we shouldn't either, right? Like, yeah.
Like, we're having fun, but like, I don't take it that seriously. As the Alien guy on this podcast, even I'm like not tweeting about it every day unless it's like a bit now. Yeah, you know.
And it's horror. It's just so different, I feel like. And I think that difference is maybe why the franchise we're talking about maybe doesn't have the standing it once did. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do, but I also think the people that love it have never loved it more.
Well, that's true, but I think
there are new fans of it.
Yeah, but I also think part of that is that it'll be coming up on 15 years pretty soon of nothing Friday the 13th related, right? No movies. There is a game, and which I think didn't something just happen with that game where like the rights lapse and now you can't even play it anymore. Like,
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's gonna stop functioning December 31st of 2024.
That's fucking psychotic. What is that?
That's video games now, man. That's what video games are like.
That should be illegal, I think.
It really should, but you can't do anything about it. Although I wonder, it's kind of like, this old Star Wars Battlefront games?
Yeah.
Like, you can't really play those online anymore because the service they use doesn't exist anymore. But there are fan communities that like host like servers that you can use. I'm assuming something like that will happen with Friday the 13th, but we will see in that regard. But yes, there's been the last movie was 2009, and that didn't really land with that big of a splash, at least compared to what people thought was going to happen. And since then, it's been kind of like claimed. But I think the people that do like this franchise have had, because there's that gap. All you can do in that gap is rewatch the movies you have, right? So you start learning to appreciate them on a new level when you're deprived of new stuff. Actually, I think there's this will be a weird comparison, but do you know the term hiatus brain?
I know hiatus. I know brain, not together though.
Well, it was a Tumblr concept. Hiatus brain was when there were the gaps between seasons of shows, right? And fans basically are deprived of the thing they want because it takes time to make things, and everyone starts to go a little crazy, like because you can only share the same GIFs so many times, the same memes, and there's a YouTuber. What's her name? Her name is Sarah Z. I think she's Canadian, so it's pronounced Sarah Z. What's that about? Anyway,
I don't know.
she goes through like weird like Tumblr history stuff, and she talks about like she's covered Sherlock like multiple times because Sherlock famously there is like a 2-year gap between series 2 and 3, and then there's a 2-year gap between series 3 and then a special, and then another year gap before the final series, right? Like there was a lot going on there. And when that like they call that the hiatus brain period, and in that period like fans run out of people to ship, like basically is what happened. And they started making up characters that weren't in the franchise to ship with other characters.
Whoa.
You can find fan edits that edit Michael Fassbender into Sherlock as like, I can't remember the character. It was some other character that is from the books but hadn't shown up on the series yet, to ship with Moriarty, I believe.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I missed that completely.
I had like vague, because I liked Sherlock when it was on, but like I was such at like the periphery of that stuff. I never did like the shipping thing back in the day. I kind of actually regret not doing it more. Like I was just,
it kind of feels like it would have been fun in hindsight.
Yeah, like now I'm too old. I can't do that shit. Like, but back when
I remember that kind of like not scarred me, but I was just like, how the fuck did that happen? And now your explanation's starting to make a lot more sense. I saw one of those GIF photo threads of someone shipping Jon Snow from Game of Thrones and Mulan from Disney's Mulan.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I did not.
We didn't know what we had.
We really did.
How did someone's brain connect those two things?
You know what, though? There's probably a good reason behind it. Like, there's probably something where you go, all right, I guess I see it. Like, because usually these people had some interesting takes. And then the joke would be like, dear God, the show has to come back. People are losing their minds. Like, it was the equivalent of like being horny on Maine on Twitter, but like it was Tumblr. And there was a lot of that. You know what? Now that I think about it, you know why I think I'm not saying I was immune to that stuff, but like why I didn't get sucked into it, because I had Hannibal, which like just actually delivered on that stuff. Like it wasn't.
You know what?
It wasn't coy. Like and by sheer coincidence, like it was just pure luck that I bet my chips on Hannibal above the other shows that were popular at the time. Like it was not me being like a smart person. And that was the one that actually delivered on the gay subtext, as opposed to basically every other show, which it just was like queer baiting. So, and when it was queer baiting, people lose their fucking minds. So, yeah. So, I think that's a long way of saying I think that's why Friday the 13th has gone up in sort of appreciation, because it's been so long since there's been a movie. And it seems
And
ridiculous
frankly,
that
more franchises could take note of this. Frankly,
take note of what.
like not pumping stuff out every year. And make no mistake, I'm aware the Friday the 13th franchise would absolutely be pumping them out on a yearly basis if they could, financially or legally.
Yeah.
I have no misconception of that fact, but I do think a smart creative producer could look at stuff like this, not specifically this franchise, but something like, hey, absence does make the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
That's
problem.
just like a fact.
That's the problem that Disney is going to have with Star Wars going forward. Not to be fucking on brand and bringing Star Wars
I
up on
didn't want to say it.
Yeah, but that is 100% the problem. We can't get excited for Star Wars to come back because it won't fucking leave. Like, it is hanging around, and the longer it hangs around, the more you get, like, annoyed with it, right? Like, I'm willing to bet money Ahsoka is better than The Mandalorian just because of the people working on it, but it's not that much better. Like, and it's not enough to. And if you're already like tapped out by like The Mandalorian being kind of lame, you're not going to give Ahsoka any time, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's the weird spot Star Wars is going to find itself in. But also, I gotta say as a counterpoint, like I know that Friday the 13th has like the legal stuff. Does Nightmare on Elm Street have a similar legal problem? Or
I think maybe that was there at one point, but now it's just like, what do you do? 'Cause
Yeah.
the remake was so universally despised, and I don't think it did, or it did okay, but like it wasn't like, well, we can't follow this up with anything anymore.
Yeah.
And then the truth of the matter is like people still associate Robert Englund with that character and that franchise. He's up there. Other
he's
people
officially,
have
he's like made statements lately where he's like, even if they offer it to me, I'm done. Like, I'm too old. Like, which is a shame. It felt like there was like a window like 5 years ago where they could have done one more with him. But
yeah.
that's
I
the other thing.
believe.
I just the other thing that was kind of frustrating about Halloween 2018, which is not the movie's fault at all, is that when that movie made like a shit ton of money, it felt like, okay, finally, all the old like 80s horror guys are gonna get another bite at the apple, right? Like they're all gonna come back, and then like it just didn't happen. And like the ones that did were like we got the weird Child's Play one that was like a weird's like rights loophole, right? Like
Yeah.
it was like a real like not there's the Chucky series obviously, which people should check out. But yeah, and then like there was not, it felt like there wasn't even a whisper of doing like a Nightmare on Elm Street, And
Yeah.
it's like that would have been the last real opportunity to bring Robert Englund back and just give him like one send off. And you could totally just, I mean, like fucking Freddy's in like shadow half the time anyway, so like just do a body double and have him do the close ups and the voice. Like that's all you need. But
Or here you go, because I believe the Craven Estate or whoever owns the rights was taking pitches very recently, and I think we even brought it up last year.
Okay.
But like here's my pitch, my unofficial pitch, because I don't think I'd ever get in the room with those people. You have Freddy successfully take over someone else's body, and so that new actor becomes Freddy, or quote unquote Freddy. If you really want to play it fast and loose, you change the actor every time because you're taking over people's bodies. That's
not a bad
literally all
take.
you have to do.
That's not a bad take.
I've not put any thought into that beyond this exact moment in time.
I just think if you're not going to get England, if he's like really done, I think the move is to just kind of find someone new. Like just find someone new that and don't do anything the other remake did. Like, and don't do a remake is the other thing. Like just like you could do like the soft reboot thing, right? But like just go like it's a new Nightmare movie. The other movies happen, but like we're barely gonna acknowledge them, and it's just there's just a new actor playing Freddy. Like
you acknowledge the history of the Elm Street mythos, right? Like oh, this is where that guy killed those kids, whatever, and then the little piano. Dun, 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 dun,
but that is
right?
also
like oh yeah, that was the 40 years ago or whatever the fuck.
Nightmare is weird though because it is kind of like the Thinking Man slasher series, like because it's so like how do you say it? Like it's so cerebral in a lot of ways because of the dream element. And I just feel like no studio would have time for that shit these days. Like,
I know, because like you go back and watch that original one, and this is important to counterpoint the original Friday the 13th. That original one, it's like Freddy's like, this is God, you know? And it's like dreams, reality, the consciousness, the self, like... Just because it's in your mind, it can physically affect you, and it's like the metaphor of that.
Yeah, if you
and the isolation of teenagers in suburban America, and it's just all this fucking shit in that movie. And then
if you walked into a studio and said any of that right now, David Zaslav would just shoot you. Like, it's just like they're like, no, we're not doing that. Like, you can't pitch these movies as anything real, you know.
No, you know what the studio note would be? It'd be like, does the mom have to be a bad mom? Can't she be a little funny?
Yeah.
I don't think the parents should be alcoholics. I don't think the kids should have sex. I think the kids should be good.
I think we need to fight.
We want them to live.
I think we need to fight the historic sexism of the Nightmare franchise. And have a strong female lead. That would be the note. It's like, we have to have a woman who will actually fight Freddy in these movies. Something that has never happened before. And you know how we know she's strong? Because she has 0 friends. Like,
she has no friends. She definitely doesn't have sex with her boyfriend.
Yeah.
She definitely doesn't have a love interest.
She doesn't
None
have
of them
time.
will ever have love interests.
She doesn't have time to have sex with her boyfriend because she's too busy focusing on her career, which is a good thing, and she wants to become a Warner Brothers executive, and oh god, what a pit we live in.
You know what's a little bit of a bummer?
What?
Both this Friday 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street franchise have been covered by Red Letter Media. So in my brain, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if Freddy Krueger was like a Warner Brothers executive? And I was like, oh fuck, they already did the bit.
Yeah, they did.
Never mind. It's a good bit. Go watch it. Go check it out.
We've got some notes. In the Freddy voice. It was.
Yeah.
Things are bad right now in terms of the intelligence.
That's a page 1 rewrite, bitch.
Things are rough in terms of the executive intelligence, where like it's that classic thing of like, we want to appeal to women, but we don't understand that. We understand that people care about sexism and the patriarchy, but we don't know how to handle any of it at all, because those problems don't affect our lives because we're billionaires. Like,
what's that one meme about like turning the racist dial while looking back at the audience for approval?
Yeah.
That's a
women.
Tweet. Do we like women or do we hate women today? Yeah. It's like turning the dial towards hate. Like, no. Okay, the other way. I don't know. I mean, what was that fucking note that I guess the Warner Brothers producers were like, do we really need that moment in Barbie where she talks to the old lady on the bench and she calls her beautiful?
Oh, yeah, the best scene in the fucking movie. Like,
I know. The scene that's like, it's the thesis of like that section of the film, maybe?
The scene where you're like, give Margot Robbie the Oscar immediately, because I did not expect to get emotional at this fucking movie out of fucking nowhere. Like, these people are out of their fucking minds. They really are. Yeah. Like,
give Margot Robbie the Friday the 13th franchise.
You know what? Here's like, no joke. If this was a different era, they should be crafting a new slasher around Margot Robbie. Like, she could be a slasher icon.
She could be a scream queen, yeah.
No, she's not the scream queen. She's the killer. I think she has that vibe. Like, she's got, because of the Harley Quinn thing, you know?
Uh-huh.
Like, give her something. She could totally do it. Because I do think, in terms of, not to be like all like fucking high and mighty about it, but like, I think there is a distinct lack of female representation in terms of the slasher icons. Like, there's a few of them, but there aren't as many, and they aren't as represented as the guys. So someone needs to be working on it.
And as fun as a reveal, like, Billy's mother is.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not like that engaging in Scream 2.
Yeah, I mean, every time they've done that, though, the joke has been like, can you believe a woman did this? Like, which is kind of sexism of a different ilk, but, like...
Yeah. Although, that's why Scream 4 rocks, because it's like, oh, yeah!
Yeah.
That actress would totally do this.
Yeah, it's we live in a...
Sorry.
We live in an odd time. But
sorry, that was a little vulgar, I guess.
Yeah, it's like it's either like, can you believe a woman did this is the twist, or it's like fucking Sleepaway Camp, which is like one of the most offensive endings of all time. Like,
yeah.
Oh my god.
Which people, again, the complicated history of horror, people have like reclaimed that.
That's what's
in their own way.
That's the other thing about that. Where like Sleepaway Camp is like 100% sleaze, right? Like,
yes.
It is not, there is no real artistic value to that fucking movie at all. And people have, like, rallied, like, people consider her an icon, right? Like, she's one of the, like, slasher icons to really deep-cut horror people. And the creation of her character is, like, offensive, Like, it came from not a, kind place, but it has been latched onto. I mean, that's also like the whole queer thing with like horror, of just like there's so much.
Which brings us right back to Friday the 13th,
although
a franchise introduction that Gene Siskel called a primordial response to the women's rights movement to tell women to get back into their place.
Yeah.
Which is frankly an incredible diss, and also I think wildly off the mark.
No, yeah, they were like, look, these movies are trash, but they were wrong about what kind of trash they were.
Yeah,
it is something
like.
We will talk about like sexism in horror films a little bit going forward, but when you hear complaints like that from like Siskel and Ebert, it is something where it's like, I'm not here to defend these movies, but did we watch the same movie? Like. It feels wildly out of touch with what the movies actually are and who the target audience is, which I think kind of like comic book films, people just ignore the fact that at least 50% of the horror audience is women, right? Like that, and I think there's a huge diversity to the audience for horror films,
Yeah, that's why they're like generally hits. Like,
yeah.
What horror movies have like outright bombed? Like made at the normal horror movie budgetary level, right?
Yeah.
Not very often do they bomb.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's partly because
because people like them.
You can just sell the idea of you got 5 teenagers, they're in a cabin, fucked up shit happens, it costs $5 million to make. And enough people are like, yeah, I'll see that. Like, it's just, that's how you get away with doing this so many times. But there's a certain, I don't know, we'll get more into it as we go through the franchise. But I will say, is in terms of like, because I was just on the subject, is this the least, not that it's not here, but is this the least like, queer subtext of the 80s horror films, like this franchise?
I don't feel like I can really speak to that as a tragic cisgender heterosexual man.
This one is
as
so
an outsider I will say I think that would be an accurate summation. I think this is the least, like, not necessarily unqueer unfriendly.
Yeah, it's not homophobic, like, really. It's just that this is it's overtly hetero at times. Like, because that's part of the appeal, is that you're watching these people have sex and then get killed. Like, that's part of, that becomes, like, such a staple of the franchise that there's so much. I know that, I think it's 7. I think 7 is the one that is singled out for kind of being a little gay, right? Like,
which one's 7 again? Hang on, I got the fucking. This is gonna tell you how we feel about the franchise.
7 is
the new
Carrie.
blood,
7
right?
is Carrie versus Jason, basically.
Uh-huh.
But that's got a lot of stuff where there's like, the guy is making out with his girl, and then he hears something outside, and he's like, hey, it might be my bro, and suddenly he forgets about having sex with his girlfriend to go find his bro, right? Like,
yeah, just guys being dudes.
Yeah, it's exactly that's what counted as gay subtext in the 80s. But it's a lot more over. You see it a lot more in other. It's in fucking Frankenstein, right? Like,
yeah.
No, Dad, I can't get married to my beautiful wife. I have to go to my laboratory castle with my male best friend to create life against God's wishes. Like, you don't get much gayer than that. Like, that is 100% what's in Frankenstein. But I feel like it is definitely. Although the other one is, you could argue, is Jason Goes to Hell, which has a lot of body swapping, and then the director being very overt about being like, I wanted to see as many like naked dudes as naked women, right? Like, that was a big part of that guy's like whole thing. But so I guess those are the two. But I think comparatively to the other slashers of the era, this one's the lesser ones. Although maybe Halloween, because Halloween's just like, there's kind of a weird, like, they keep, like, anytime they try to force more sexual stuff into the Halloween franchise, it just doesn't work, you know?
Yeah, that is strange, especially considering how that franchise starts with him murdering his sister after she had sex.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I guess I never really thought about that franchise that way, which is maybe even more to the point of that.
I think it's relevant here because a lot of what Halloween gets tagged with the whole, like, teens having sex, getting killed, that feels like it was just kind of like an accidental thing that happened with the first Halloween, you know? I don't think that's what they were setting out to do. I think all that stuff was more just to portray, like, the vulnerability and the innocence of young teenagers, whereas Friday the 13th 100% goes in on that stuff, mainly because they were just trying to copy Halloween, right? Like,
I don't think it was a malicious intent at first anyways, but it is something that does happen. They're like, whoops. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you and I both watched Memories of Crystal Lake.
Crystal Lake Memories.
That is like the 8th time Matt's had to correct me on that title. I quite enjoyed that documentary. I really would recommend it. But I forget if it's like the director or writer or producer who mentions that, like, you know, the final girl, Alice in the first movie, right? She only lives because, like, not because she was, like, pure or whatever. It's like she just wasn't busy with everyone else. That was literally it. It wasn't like an malintent.
Yeah. She plays strip poker. I mean, it's not strip poker, strip Monopoly, which is the board game they're playing in it. Like, she doesn't get naked, but, like, she is playing the game, you know.
Yeah, like they're just hanging out.
Yeah, and there's that, like, sexual tension between her and that one guy. And it's like, you know, it's all there. And, like, you know, similar with Laurie Strode in the first Halloween, like, she smokes weed in that movie, right? Like, she's not a complete innocent. But it's one of those where I think it's something that these franchises get tagged with that just isn't accurate. And I think the further removed we get, maybe if we were living in the era where, like, slasher films were just all over the place, it would feel more like that. But the further removed, I just feel like that's, like, almost an accidental thing they stumbled on. And then when it became a meme of someone being like, you notice that all the teens who have sex get killed? Then they just lean into it because they know it's funny. It's less a thematic element. It's more just like, this is what the audience is expecting. But, I mean, that's a key joke in Jason X, right? Like,
we're going to get to that movie.
Yeah, so.
If you want to call it that. But the first Friday 13th, released in 1980, absolutely 100% a ripoff of Halloween. Trying to ride the coattails of that film's success. Everyone involved with the production of the film cops to that immediately. They have never tried to hide that. They were like, Halloween made more money than God. Let's also do that. It was, of course, a massive success. The budget was like $500,000 or something like that, and it made almost $60 million, $59.8 million. Jesus Christ!
And the two things with that movie are, one, it's like they had no script, and Sean S. Cunningham, who directed that movie, basically put an ad in Variety that just said Friday the 13th, the most terrifying movie ever made, just mainly to see if anyone would sue them for using the title. And then they got all these people interested that were like, hey, I'll invest. And he's like, all right, cool. Like it was really something as simple as that. And then they were like, well, let's just do Halloween. And then the other thing is that it got picked up by Paramount, and Paramount gave it a wide release and treated it like a blockbuster film, which is the real shift, right? The other story is it came down for Paramount. They saw the money Halloween made, and they were like, we got to get in on this. And it came down to, do we pick up Prom Night or Friday the 13th? Like, it was like allegedly like it came down to those two movies. And Prom Night, another one, which, you know, that movie cost $1 million, made like $14 million. They went with Friday the 13th instead. And because of the marketing push they gave it, that movie made $60 million, basically, right? Like, that's the real shift of the studios being like, we can pick up these cheap ass horror movies and release them wide and make, you know, a huge amount of return on our investment. That was the real shift with Friday the 13th. And then once the back-to-back success of Prom Night and Friday the 13th, that's when everyone and their cousin is like, let's go out in the woods and film a guy stabbing teenagers. Like, that's really the moment it happens, you know. And it's Halloween, like, you know, Halloween obviously, yes, is kind of the codifier of the slasher thing, but I think Friday the 13th is the one that kicks everything really off with the wave of slashers that come. I've brought it up on our other retrospectives. There's a great documentary and a great book called Going to Pieces, The Rise and Fall of the Slasher Film, which kind of follows the arc. And the slasher boom actually lasted a lot shorter than we realized. Like, Freddy kind of shows up after the boom has already ended, right? Like, it's basically over by the time Freddy shows up. But at that point, it becomes very character-centric, and that's when you start seeing, like, well, who do we have laying around? Let's bring them back. And it becomes very much like, Michael Myers is back, Leatherface is back, fucking like that. Now we're franchise-based characters. But the idea of, you know, picking a fucking holiday and making a horror movie around it, it was less of that by that point. Let me ask you, so, like, alright, so you're a latecomer to horror. When did you, like, learn about Jason?
I learned about Jason when Freddy vs. Jason was coming out. I did not watch that movie, but a friend and their family, still close with some of my family, but they and their relatives were super into horror, and they were always trying to get me to watch it, and I was a big scaredy cat in middle school, so I was like, no, go away. But they would watch Nightmare on Elm Street, all the Friday the 13th stuff, all the time. When Freddy vs. Jason came out, we had like a sleepover, and they ended up watching like a rental at some point, and then I was just like, I'm gonna go to another room, and then I just hung out with like the pets or something like that. But that's when I first discovered, like, okay, that's the hockey mask guy, that's Jason. Okay, that took a minute to stick, and I was like, okay, Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger got more like satirical play in pop culture. People that was more of he became more of a butt of the joke throughout history a little bit. So that one stuck with me more, and then eventually, of course, I fell in love with that franchise. But I don't think I actually sit down to watch Friday the 13th until like, oh god, I might even be in my 20s by that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think I'm like 19 or 20 when I actually start watching all of these.
I definitely came to Friday the 13th later, but also later for me is like 13, right? Like,
okay.
Like, just because just with how I watched horror movies growing up, mainly because they didn't play these as much on like basic cable because of like the violence and nudity. Like, they would have to edit them to shit usually. Jason is one of those ones where I feel like I was just always aware of him, again because I would go stand in the horror aisle, and I would look at the boxes, and I was kind of like, wow, look at this, like, and there's so many covers with the fucking hockey mask on it. Also, I think I brought this up on the Final Fantasy episode we did for the retrospective, where when I'm a kid and I see that like there are 10 Final Fantasy games, and I'm like, this must be the epic of a generation. Like, where you know, I'm like, this must be massive, and to see that this franchise is like Friday the 13th Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5, and I'm like, what the fuck happens in this series? Because I'm like, the only other Part 1, Part 2 I know is The Godfather. Like, I know, so I'm like, what is this epic of horror cinema that is also so frightening that, like, my dad, who basically let me watch anything, was like, you can't really watch those. And it was more the nudity stuff that he had a problem with, but there was kind of like a bit of a line with that. But I knew the, like, hockey mask thing. I also learned from a young age, before even seeing the movie, that it is not Jason in the first movie, it's his mother. I was told that before seeing the original Friday the 13th. And not because of the movie Scream. My dad just told me, because I used to be like I would show him like a cover to a horror movie, and I'd be like, Dad, what's this one about? It's like I'm like 5 doing this, and he would describe the plot as he remembered it, right? Like it was often very inaccurate and also scarier than the movies usually ended up being. Like, he described the plot of Child's Play to me. Well, no, it's not even that he like went like too into detail, but you know, Child's Play in context has like a lot of humor to it, you know? Mm-hmm. And to have your father go, yeah, it's about a mom who buys like a doll that is possessed by a killer, and the doll it kills a babysitter, and then it kills like a cop, and then it kills like another person. Like that's how you would describe the movie to me.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, they would try and catch it, and the one guy caught it, but then it killed him, and like that's how he would describe these movies. And the pictures I'm forming in my mind are like 10 times scarier than the movie could ever be. That's just what happens, right? Like, that is the power of imagination. That is the power of, you know, like, that's why the Blair Witch Project works for some people. Fuck you, Ethan. But, that's the power of that kind of stuff. And my dad I was like, what's Friday the 13th about? He's like, well, it's about a guy named Jason, except for the first movie where it's his mother. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what does that mean? And for the thing he really remembered about it, and he really drove home, he was like, you know what's really cool? He was like, what's really cool about the first Friday the 13th movie is that it ends with the mother's head getting cut off. And he's like, that looks like the way her head gets cut off in that movie is like super cool. Like, it looked real. Like, he told me that when I was a child. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, when does Jason show up? And he's like, the next one. And he kills the girl from the first movie, like in the first 5 minutes of the second one. And I'm like, oh, all right. Like, that's how I knew this franchise for the longest time. And
that's incredible.
I even went as Jason for Halloween, I think 4th or 5th grade, without ever having seen any of the movies. I just dressed up as Jason. I put like a fucking jumpsuit on and a hockey mask, and I was Jason. And I think I mixed up Leatherface and Jason, like 2 movies like I hadn't seen either franchise by that point, because I think I had like a fake chainsaw I carried, which I think Jason uses a chainsaw at some point in these movies, but that's not the machete is his primary weapon. But did you have a kid? This is something that I guess you didn't if you weren't, but did you have the kid in your class who was like obsessed with horror, like a way into horror kid, and would like want to tell you about horror and like Jason and like how cool Jason was? Did you have that kid?
Yes, Nick Valero.
Mine was named Nick too.
Wow, yeah. Nick, you guys, all the Nicks out there, all the Nicholases, get together. What happened there? Talk about what happened there.
I don't know what's going on there.
What brought you all to that point?
But Nick could not stop talking about Jason. Like, he really liked talking about Jason. And, yeah. And you know what? Nick wasn't a bad guy. I feel like I kind of like was a bit of a dick to him in the way you're a dick to people in middle school for no reason, right? Like, you're just kind of like, you're too full. You're just an idiot because you're fucking in middle school. But he was an alright guy. I wonder how he's doing. I did not keep up with him. I knew a few Nicks, and they were all strange.
Okay. My Nick's right. I like my Nick.
The other Nick was our class pirate. Did you have a pirate? We've talked about this. That
no, I've never had a pirate.
for some reason, a lot of people I know at least had one pirate in their grade, and Nick,
maybe that's an East Coast thing.
Maybe it's just like you got to be closer to where there were actual
to the
ships.
Caribbean.
Yeah, but I don't know. We had a Nick pirate. We had Nick, so there was Nick Jason and Nick Pirate. So, but he was super into it. And then I was actually thinking about watching these movies. I hadn't watched them all in a long time. I was trying to be like, what was like? I know I had probably seen Friday the 13th 1 on like AMC at some point, right? Which is like, I think they used to do a lot of like Halloween stuff. And I was watching it and it suddenly hit me that I think the ones I watched initially are either starting with 5, but I'm not positive. Definitely 6 was an early one. 6, at least 6 through 8 were the first ones I watched because there was a late night Friday the 13th marathon that I do not remember the channel it was on, but the gag was whenever they cut the commercial break, the joke was they would cut the people running a marathon, and then the joke would be they would reveal that Jason was running the marathon too, as in like he was chasing the runners, like, and it'd be like, we'll be right back with the Friday the 13th marathon, and I definitely saw, like, I had some core memories kind of come back revisiting 6, 7, and 8, where I think I came in, I maybe caught the ending of 5, and then I remember a lot of 6 and 7, and then Jason Takes Manhattan, basically, like, right when he got to Manhattan, I fell asleep, like, and that was it. And the other thing, like you two were, I remember the advertising for Jason X when, like, that movie was coming out. I remember he just wanted his machete, which I think was in every ad for that movie. Not understanding that was a joke. Like, I just kind of took it at face value. And then when Freddy vs. Jason came out, when that movie hit DVD, I think I rented it. So that was like an early one for me of the movies.
Well, here to if I could dial it back just a little bit really quick, back to the original Friday the 13th. Mm-hmm. I might be, and I didn't remember this until I was rewatching all this stuff and watching the documentary and looking at the history of this franchise. I might be one of the rare cases of someone born after the year 1990 who genuinely did not know Jason wasn't in the first Friday the 13th
really?
When I saw it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. All right.
Because I thought... Like, did you used to ever, like, try to catch up with stuff people were either watching or reading? Like, comics were a big one where I was like, wait, no, I'm not supposed to start here, whatever, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I gotta find the... Because, like, people maybe don't understand right now, especially younger people than us, like, there were no wikis to describe how to get into something, or, like, there was no maps to getting into a TV show. It's like you either caught it when it was on or you didn't, right? Yeah. Like TiVo and VHS recording even was like a later era thing that we could start doing. So when I started Friday the 13th finally, and I was like, I'm gonna get into horror, I was like, did I get the wrong one? What? Is this the wrong maybe file I found online that fell off a truck? Because I couldn't afford stuff back then. But I was like, no, this is like, what is this? What is this? And it just took me a minute to realize, like, no, Jason's mom's the killer in the first movie.
Yeah.
She's not magic. She's not a zombie. So I was caught very off guard.
That is the crazy thing about this franchise, is how long it takes them to actually solidify what the series is known for in pop culture. Like, how long it takes to fully form the idea, right? Like,
yeah.
you have stuff like, I mean, Nightmare has, like, the famous, like, the first one kind of stands on its own as its own movie, right? Like, it's kind of just a self-contained story. The second one, like, goes off in a weird direction, right? Like, it doesn't really work. And then, but by the time they get to 3, they're like, here's what this is what the franchise is. And that's 3 kind of like sets the template, right? And like 3, 4, 5 they're all kind of like that, you know, like that, and it's like, okay, those are like the core of the franchise. With Friday the 13th, it takes, I would argue, until 6 to really land it. Like, that's how long it takes before all the pieces come together. Like, every one brings something to it, but it takes 6 for all of them to be in one movie. And to be what you picture in your mind when you think of Friday the 13th.
Do you know what other franchise it kind of has a similar trajectory, and it's not a horror franchise? It's the fucking Fast and the Furious.
A little bit, yeah.
I like all those early ones too. But what people recognize as family and cars and the going to space and shit, that's not till Fast 5 and 6.
5
That is when those movies become like what they are now.
No, that 100%. It's very similar. We're like 5 and 6. It's like, okay, this is what the franchise is now. It is that. Like, everything before that had pieces that would be in 5, but it is Fast 5 that brings all of them together. It is a fascinating comparison, and a totally accurate one. Which it's just, we don't get too many franchises like that ever. Like, where it takes that long for it.
I think one day that will happen again. It'll have to be a low budget film first, and then they'll grow into something else, right?
Well, you know,
but it'll be a while.
Here's something. I'm not as familiar with the Saw movies, but I know that franchise goes in some wild directions, and there's
it does. That one is pretty, like, that trajectory is determined by the first one. They just get more unhinged. Like, here's like the template, the big reveal for obvious stuff that you recognize at a certain point, the big twist, the flashback, the Hello Zep theme. Like, they all do that at some point, right? They all end up just doing more extreme versions of that,
but
to
they all do
degrees of success.
Here's something that, like, I'm not as familiar with it, but it feels like the first 2 are very much like locked room stories, right? Like, now obviously
locked room and then locked house.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, it's a room sequel, bigger. It's a house this time. Like, that's 100% what they did, which is just that's what horror franchises used to do. And does it stick to that? Like, and if you ask people what Saw is, would people say, like, that's the story where people are trapped in a confined space with horrific traps set around them? Because, like, Saw goes off in, like, weird directions where, like, it's partly a detective series, but it's also like, there's also the guy's been dead since the second movie. Like, it's
the third movie, which is incredible.
No, he dies.
And he came back for the fucking 10th one.
But he dies at the end of 2, right?
No, he dies at the end of 3. John Kramer dies at the end of Saw 3. The opening images of Saw 4 are his autopsy. So naturally, he returns for Saw X.
Man, I feel like
I love that franchise.
I'm gonna have to defer to you, but I so vividly remember Saw 2 ending with him dying.
No, the image of him in the van. I know what you're talking about. It looks like he's dead.
Oh,
he's
but
not.
Okay, because I thought
with the bloody face and everything. Yes.
3, which is the one I think kind of fucks it up, where the girl is kind of taking over for him, right? And
a little Amanda, yes.
Yeah, and then it's like, you've gone too far. Like, that's kind of like, and then she dies, right? I feel like
and
that's
then
like
his new apprentice comes in, and people like hated that character at first because he's not interesting. But now people have also talk about weird horror fan tropes and stuff like that. They've now reclaimed him as like a himbo slasher king.
Okay.
And that's just like a fucking wild trajectory, because I remember people being like, well, these sequels to Saw, now they suck. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, whoa, Hoffman, let's go! You know, like,
I just feel like they had something.
Ridiculous.
I just feel like they had something there with the girl that they kind of fucked up with the third one. Like, but,
oh yeah, no, I agree. What's that actress's name? Shawnee.
Yeah, Shawnee Smith from The Blob.
Shawnee Smith.
Yeah.
Yes. Great actress.
Yeah, she's had an incredibly strange career.
Yeah.
And somehow just ended up being a mainstay of the Saw franchise. But one of these days, I was gonna marathon them because of the new movie that's out, and I just didn't because I ended up getting sucked into the fucking Friday the 13th thing. And one of these days, because like I saw Spiral in theaters because it was like the first day I was able to go back. That's such a weird movie.
All right, so let's talk about the transition from Friday 13th to Friday 13th Part 2.
Okay, well, hold on. Is there anything... let me think. All right, Friday the 13th 1. It's the mom. She gets her head cut off. I'm trying to think what is notable in the first one. There's the music. There is
the music by it should be mentioned. What's his name? The fucking Harry Manfredini.
Yes.
That theme people have called iconic. I will be completely honest. It tends to leave my brain a little bit.
No, I think
no, this is me. This is I should say this is 100% me. That is not a fault of the franchise or the films or the artist Harry Manfredini. It is me who has no big affinity for this franchise. That is the revelation that I have not hidden from anyone on planet Earth, that I'm not the biggest Friday the 13th guy.
Yeah, neither
but
am I.
I do appreciate these.
Came to it a little later. It was just one where like I had done basically every other guy by the time I got to Jason, and so he just didn't play as strongly. Kevin Bacon in this.
Oh,
yeah,
of course.
Not his film debut. He was in Animal House the year previously. Somehow they had like these two back-to-back like low-budget movies that became monster hits that people weren't really expecting. And then I think Footloose is like right afterwards, and that's like basically what solidifies him. Trying to think if there's anything. The girl getting killed like 20 minutes in, who like you think might be the protagonist. She's kind of that's an interesting choice. There's a lot of stuff. I'll just say there's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie that just becomes the template beyond reason with like the next like 4 movies, which is like the teens, they're getting ready to start the camp up again. There's usually a cop character that you assume will show up in the third act to be like, whatever. There's the final girl discovering all the bodies of her friends, which is lifted from Halloween, but they seem to do that for like the first 4 of these movies.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of stuff that by the time I got to the 3rd movie, I was like, we're doing this again? But I think my whole thing is that like it turns out like this, the early ones, like the first like 5 are the ones I just haven't watched as much, where I think I've seen the latter few more times, which I think is different for some people. But I'm trying to think what and then there's the final shot, which they didn't take from the final scare, which they didn't take from Halloween. They took from Carrie. They literally just like, this movie needs something to end. Like, remember how Carrie had a scary ending? Let's end it like Carrie. And that's like why the movie ends like this. And inadvertently paves the way for Jason to show up. So.
I know. To the point where, and I guess I'll mention a couple more things about the first one, but, you know, the big thing about Friday the 13th Part 2 is that everyone was like, well, what do you even do for a sequel? Everyone's dead, including the killer. And they've not established any supernatural events.
No.
The ending is just supposed to be that
although
sort of quasi dream sequence, maybe.
Yeah. Although here's my big question: Is Jason supernatural in parts 2 through 4?
No,
I don't think. Yeah, he isn't.
Officially,
right?
no.
Yeah, like
legally, no.
He gets an axe to the head and like keeps coming, but like it's
just like
he's
the
supposed
motivation
to be...
one of the producers gave the guy playing Jason, who wait, I should actually mention, in the fourth film, the final chapter is Ted
Yeah.
White. In part 2, it is Warrington Gillette. Here, let me just fucking I'm gonna list all of them right now. Give me 1 second.
But there's also like a lot of
up.
debate about like who played Jason. Like Warrington Gillette, like also like he's the unmasked Jason in part 2, but there was another guy who was masked Jason, and like there's even like confusion among the actors as to who played Jason in what scenes for that one. Because I think the whole thing with Warrington in the second one was that he couldn't actually do a lot of the stunts, so they had to find a guy who could actually do the stunts. And he went uncredited, I think, the other guy, for a long time, and then later it kind of came out that like, oh, there were 2 guys playing Jason in the second movie. So, and that's just the beginning. There's a lot of that throughout this franchise of like weird like ups and downs as to who is playing Jason.
Yeah, I mean, in the documentary as well, there's also that one guy who's like, yeah, my mom wouldn't let me work those hours and work under all those prosthetics in the cold lake, so I didn't get to play Jason.
Oh no, that was it. Was
and he's like, I'm not bitter.
It was Sean. It's Sean Cunningham's son. It was going to be Sean S. Cunningham's son was going to be young Jason in the first movie, and his mom was like, no. You're not putting our kid in the fucking cold water. We should do a little bit of table setting on Sean S. Cunningham now that I think about it.
Let's do it.
Who, he gets his start. He basically started in, like, softcore pornography. Like, incredibly softcore stuff. Out of nowhere does Last House on the Left with Wes Craven, right? Which kind of, like, gets Wes Craven's career going. Which is, like, a weird, like it's weird where like both him and Craven feel like they have like a weird like philosophical bent to them. Cunningham less so, but I think it says a lot that like when Cunningham comes back into the franchise for Jason Goes to Hell, he has a weird idea about where to take the movies because he's thinking of it from a different perspective. But yeah, he does Last House on the Left, which is kind of like one of the early like Grindhouse, like that's like a progenitor of Halloween and shit like that, right? Like, the movie is essentially marketed on, you will not believe how fucked up this movie is. And then he was also in softcore pornography, and it made, I believe, a children's film or 2 children's films before, and he was going to, at the last minute, he almost backed out of Friday the 13th because he was like, you know what? I don't want to do another violent movie like that. I got another kids film I want to try and do, and I'll do that. And then, like, at the last second, pivoted back to Friday the 13th. Like, there's all sorts of stories like that. Cunningham's still alive. He's like he's 81. He's still alive, and I think he won some lawsuit not too long ago about the rights to Friday the 13th. But that's a fucking can of worms right there. He basically leaves the franchise after 1, and then doesn't come back until Jason Goes to Hell, and after that his name is on the franchise again because he's on Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, Freddy vs. Jason, and the Friday the 13th quote unquote remake. But hey, I don't know if there's anything really. He did all the House movies.
Have you ever seen those?
Yeah, they're pretty fun.
They're fun. Yeah, they're very strange. So House and House 2 are written by Fred Dekker. He gets rewritten on the first House. Fred Dekker, for genre fans, know he was Shane Black's main collaborator back in the day. They're still friends. They co-wrote The Predator together and have not been open, but have said that project started very fun. Mm-hmm. And that's that. But Fred Dekker, a big genre guy. I don't love everything he's done, but I would recommend House and House 2. I've not seen House 3. House 2 especially is like fucking wild.
Yeah. House 3, directed by the late James Isaac, who will go on to direct Jason X. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And, I mean, obviously, we have to mention House, the first House, was directed by Steve Miner, who directs Friday 13th Part 2 and 3.
Yes. Kind of
Now,
they call him the protege of Sean S. Cunningham. He seems to want nothing to do with the franchise these days. He doesn't seem to do any interviews for anything Friday the 13th related, which is kind of interesting. He hasn't made a movie in a long time. His last movie was Private Valentine, starring Jessica Simpson, where it looks like it's a comedy film where Jessica Simpson ends up in the army. So I'm sure it's great. I also directed. God, he's got a wild career. He's got the first House. He's got Soul Man, the C. Thomas Howell blackface movie. Yeah. Warlock, starring the late Julian Sands, we just recently lost Julian Sands.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Rest in peace, Julian Sands. He also did Big Bully, the movie that basically convinced Rick Moranis to quit acting. Yeah. Halloween H2O, which we've covered. Lake Placid, a movie I should love and I fucking hate.
It's every time, right? You try to give it a shot and you're like, no. Big Alligator movie.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I should love this.
And Oliver Platt is like Jeff Goldblum in that, but if like Jeff Goldblum's character was like in Jurassic Park, like maybe sexually assaulted women or something. That character, Oliver Platt's character in Lake Placid, is one of the strangest characters ever. Bill Pullman was the sheriff in that movie, who never seems to ever be concerned that a giant crocodile is eating people. Brendan Gleeson is in there for some goddamn reason. That movie sucks ass, man. That's such a bad movie. 82 minutes with credits. That's shame on you. And then the Day of the Dead remake, which is one of those movies that I think like sat on a shelf for a year and then went direct to video, which I've never seen. I've never seen the Day of the Dead remake. I'm assuming it's not good.
Well, I don't know how to break it to you.
Oh.
But, yeah, it's not very good.
Who could have seen that coming?
I believe that, if I remember correctly, that is the movie that started, or that has the scene, that contains the scene with the car driving in that green pastured valley, and then the zombie jumps out and scares someone. Have you seen that meme? Or it's not a meme, it was like a viral video. Like, no, it's like the car driving. Like,
I might have, but it's
a
already...
jump scare video. That's what that is.
But yeah, there's I just remember that movie because it was kind of like post the Dawn of the Dead remake, and
yeah, that's why it got greenlit.
Yeah, and then it just like it felt like it was never gonna come out, and then it kind of just like quietly got released on VOD. And that's also the same time when like Zack Snyder is talking Army of the Dead, which like confused things even further. And there's a lot going on there. There's the whole Dead. That's a franchise and a half right there. The whole fucking Dead thing. But yeah, Stephen Miner does the next two. What happens in 2 that is even worth discussing?
Well, it's the introduction of Jason.
Jason. He wears a bag in this one. He has
again, no hockey mask yet.
No hockey. Yeah. It takes forever to get to the hockey mask. He kills the surviving girl from the first movie in the first 10 minutes.
I mean, I always hated when slasher franchises did this.
Yes.
To the point where, like, I outright rejected Nightmare 4 for a while because I was like, no, Nightmare 3, you know? And now I love Nightmare 4 for wholly different reasons. But it is basically a betrayal. Like, to me, it shows non-committal nature of a narrative. And it's also just like, yeah, these things are not about anyone important. They're about making money from the audience and just doing some fucked up
But
shit.
I also think it establishes the kind of brutal reputation that Friday the 13th has. That, like, literally the only person that made it through the first movie dies 10 minutes into the second one. And it's kind of interesting. Although I believe the story there though is that the actress had gotten a stalker between the release of the first and second movies, and basically wanted to like back away from acting for good post Friday the 13th. So she has a very bit part, and it was kind of her choice, but like there's a lot of mixed stuff about like she also wanted some more money, but I also think she was kind of like ready to be done with the thing.
The stalker thing is very scary and unfortunate, and she does talk about that in the documentary as well.
It's funny
from my recollection, what she says in the documentary is that she didn't know she was gonna get killed off basically until she was on set, and there was no dialogue for her. They were like, just kind of walk around and just talk about how you're trying to move on or whatever. Like
they basically had her improvise the scene, and so it's strange.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. My cables are being weird. So yeah, there's that happens. It's the second one is basically the same plot as the first movie. It has the incredible wheelchair kill, which I do enjoy.
Oh yeah. Well, here let's mention really quick. So the kills in the first movie, even, I don't think they're that thrilling. The effects on them, however, are wonderful. Done by the uberly talented Tom Savini. Gets hired off George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which I'm sure we both love.
Yes.
And many people love. And he notoriously read the script for the second film, and he was like, "What? Like what? No, Jason's dead though." And they're like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna be the killer this time." And he was just like, "Oh no, I'm good. Like I'm all right. You guys go ahead."
You know what's weird though? This is something we'll bring up a few times, but like there is Savini has a well-deserved reputation as like a gore guy, right? Because he's like worked on like so many great movies. But you assume, I had always just assumed he worked on more of these movies than he actually did. He works on only like 2 of them, right? Like
he works on 1 and 4.
Yeah, like that's crazy because the gore is pretty consistently good. Like the only issue they really run into is the MPAA like cracking down on it, right? Like it's still they still got creative with a lot of the kills. Although there does seem to be a lot of repeats of like throat slashing and like there's a lot of arrows. There's a couple things that repeat.
A lot of poking.
Yeah, well,
not just sexually.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing, but it's a lot of the axe to the face in the first one is pretty great. Like in terms of just like how effective it is.
Yeah.
And like everyone talks about the Kevin Bacon one. There's a lot of good moments. But because
even if Kevin Bacon didn't become Kevin Bacon, he would always have that kill, which is pretty good. That one is pretty good.
I'm glad that the funny guy in the first one died off camera, and we just see his dead body because fuck that guy. The worst character in all of these movies is the funny guy. Like I hate the funny guy they always introduce in one of these fucking movies. But usually they're very integral to the film too, which makes me even angrier.
Well, here, let me ask you this. So, I think for fans, the common knowledge is that, well, Friday the 13th Part 2 is where the franchise gets good as a slasher.
Mm-hmm. No.
Do you agree? You don't agree?
No. Well, all right. Look, I'm not a big fan of the franchise in general. I will have positive things to say as we go on. It eventually does kind of get into a good groove, in my opinion. But I think 2 and 1 are of a similar par, frankly. I don't think there's a step up or step down. It's just like we're starting to accumulate the elements. The problem is it's the same fucking plot is the thing. Like, not that these movies have to be that complicated, but they hit so many of the same beats. It gets a little frustrating. I also have mentioned poor Crazy Ralph dies 30 minutes into Friday the 13th Part 2. After
who is my
warning.
favorite character, by the way?
So, R.I.P. Crazy
Who
Ralph.
apparently was actually crazy or something.
Well, no,
right?
they said they thought he was, but I think he was just an old guy that they just found. Like, I don't think he was actually crazy, but he just...
That makes it sound like those, like when Michael Mann's talking about, like, that homeless man with the TV at the beginning of Heat. He was like, yeah, we just found this guy on the corner of, like, Vicente or whatever. It's like, all right, sure.
You have the people
They just found that guy.
Yeah, half the people working on Michael Mann movies are former criminals. Like, but yeah, I don't think there's much really to talk about that I can think of off the top of my head.
I will say something on this rewatch that really clicked with me, and again, I'm coming at it from like more of an appreciative standpoint of like, these are beer, cheeseburgers, pizza night movies with friends that love this stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think part of what affected my rewatch is that I was watching them by myself, you know, and I also tried to get them all watched in time to do this thing. 'Cause this is kind of a last-minute thing we threw together, and I kind of regretted my decision to push us towards this as I was watching 3. And I think if I was if we were both watching these together, I think we would have had a much more fun time doing it, I think. If we had just deliberately driven ourselves insane trying to watch all the movies in a row, like just like stay up 24 hours to watch all of them, I think we could have had some fun. I think that's what these movies are really built for. But in terms of just sitting by yourself and just kind of like taking them in, it can be a little like, if you don't have anyone to bounce off of to talk over the boring parts, essentially, it's not as engaging. Especially because the early ones have a lot of boring parts.
Yeah. I mean, like, what I was going to say is that something I appreciated is that there is a general hangout vibe to when the teens are hanging out and stuff like that, and the camp counselors are hanging out, and, like, there's I see why people respond to this stuff. It's like, it's not just that this is a slasher trope, it's that this is kind of this is maybe the franchise that establishes these slasher tropes, you know? Mm-hmm. It's probably not the first franchise that did it, or maybe the first movies that did it, but I think it's the first franchise that it's like, this is our template. Yeah. Halloween obviously has the teen angle stuff going on, but that's really only the first movie by this point in time when the first Friday the 13th comes out, right? Mm-hmm. Halloween 2, it is primarily an adult cast. Mm-hmm. Because it's mostly in the hospital stuff, right? Halloween 3, of course, is the one with all the weird shit that I love, and then by the time you get to Halloween 4, it's like way later than a couple Friday the 13ths. Mm-hmm. So, I get the admiration for the drinking, high, sex camp counselor stuff. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're a teenage horror nerd. Yes. This must be the best. I'm at the point where I just admire it from afar.
That's the thing. I think by the time I got to these, like, genuinely, I'm already, like, through my, like, gorehound phase, right? Like, I'm not as shocked by gory images in these type of movies like I used to be, you know? Like, I grew up on the Final Destination movies. Like, it's, by that point, like, I'm not as freaked out. And, I'm probably, like, getting into, like, J-horror and stuff like that, which, like, is, like, way extreme. And so that, you know, this stuff back in the 80s, this was probably the franchise to see this kind of violence, but it looks, it's not tamer, it's very good gore. It's just I had kind of already had my fill by the time I got to these movies in earnest. Friday the 13th Part 3, Part 3D. He gets the iconic...
I didn't like this movie.
No, I hated this one.
I didn't hate it, but I think I like them less and less.
Well, yeah, that's the
4.
It's like there's a weird like downward trajectory that's a little frustrating because like you're kind of hoping that it goes up, you know, because it doesn't exactly start.
I'm hoping I get something more out of it from the sleaze angle or something.
I mean, they're cranking them out so fast at this point, and they're basically the same plots over and over again, right? Like, literally all they could think of to do with the third one to change things up was to do it in 3D. Like, aside from that, it's the same fucking movie, you know? Just with a whole new group of teenagers. And there's so much busy work, especially in the first 3, of the teens hanging out, just like killing time before Jason can show up and kill everyone. And even when he starts showing up, it takes them all forever to realize. And by the time, like, that's the thing, it's the final girl template that I just don't care for, really, which is that by the time we know it's Jason the whole movie, right? Like, there's no mystery, obviously. Also, the other thing about the first one is that it's essentially a mystery film, but not really, because there's no way to solve it. But
yeah.
There's the mystery element is completely pointless. But with this, we know it's Jason, and everyone's dead by the time any character knows it's Jason, so they don't have time to really be like scared of Jason, you know? Like it's just kind of mindless, like set him up, knock him down, like teenagers getting killed, right? Like there's no fun to it, in my opinion. Whereas, I don't know, like some of the other Halloween stuff, there's like a certain point where it's like Michael Myers is on the loose, and like that becomes the threat, you know? That like they know Michael Myers is out there, but where he is the problem, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I mean, the main direction one of the Jason actors got at one point, like in these early movies specifically, was like, your Jaws, you have no motivation, you just want to kill people. It's like that's all that matters. Just that's it. And it's like, yeah, there's nothing there for the character. There's no entity. Jason is not an entity yet. He's just like the masked man in the woods.
The second one does have the it's the second one, right, where the girl uses like childhood psychology on him to get him to not kill her, like where she pretends to be his mother, which is kind of an interesting choice. That's probably the only characterization Jason gets in the first few movies. And they start establishing that Jason, like for all his horrific violence, he's a bit of a mama's boy, which is an interesting choice.
It's something. It's one thing.
And I don't know if I have anything else other than Jason gets the hockey mask in 3. He gets it from the annoying guy who we don't even see his throat get slit. He just shows up and his throat's slit, and everyone thinks he's doing a prank because his bit is that he does pranks. I hate him. I'm glad when he's dead. And I'm glad Jason got the hockey mask. I feel more sorry for the girl who thinks it's him doing another prank again, and I think she gets her eye fucking shot out or something. But yeah, fuck that. Fuck the goofy guy. I hate him.
Yeah, people really liked Steve Miner as a slasher director. I know people really love his Halloween, H2O. We've talked about it before. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's not terrible. It's probably my favorite movie of his, if I'm being honest. But I don't get much out of his work. I'm sure he's a fine fellow.
Yes.
Let's talk about Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
The
fourth movie in the 13 franchise.
Yeah. Also, hysterically, probably the movie you could start with, honestly. Like, if you want to just get into the franchise real quick, start with the final chapter. Like, there's enough of like a preamble to it that sets up like the basic mythology that you don't even need to see the other movies. You know?
Yeah,
if
bit.
You're trying to get into them quick, and like this is the beginning of the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, essentially, the unofficial trilogy, and it's kind of that there's an overarching thing there. Joseph Zito did it, who at this point had done movies like Blood Rage and The Prowler, and he will go on to do Missing in Action and Invasion USA. Both Chuck Norris movies. Missing in Action famously was shot after Missing in Action 2. It was supposed to be the sequel to Missing in Action 2, but Missing in Action 2 was so bad they decided to release the second one first, and then they marketed Missing in Action 2 as a prequel. So
I want to clarify something. So Joseph Zito directs that movie Blood Rage. There is another movie called Blood Rage, which is totally trying to build the hype off of Friday the 13th. But the Blood Rage I'm referring to came out in 1987. Joseph Zito's came out in 1980 or 1979. Excuse me.
I know people
and the
talk
Blood
about.
Rage I'm referring to is also like 3 separate titles. It's also called Nightmare at Shadow Woods. And the in-movie title that pops up on the screen, the version I saw at least, is just called Slasher.
Good job. I know people like that movie.
If you like Friday the 13th movies, there's no reason you wouldn't love Blood Rage. Yeah. I like Blood Rage.
The Prowler, also another
incredible score.
Also, The Prowler, another one of those in the wake of Friday the 13th type horror movies where it cost about $1 million to make, and it made about $1 million. And Lawrence Tierney's in that one. And Tom Savini worked on. I think he went to do The Prowler instead of Friday the 13th Part 2. So I think that's the one where the killer, when he's revealed, not to spoil it, but when he's revealed, I think that's the one where a shotgun blows his face off.
I mean, who doesn't love a good shotgun blast to the face?
Oh, yeah, that seemed to be Tom Savini's thing, because it's like that and Maniac, too, where like the shotgun. I think it's even Tom Savini who gets shot in the face in Maniac. It's supposed to be anyway. And like that's like one of like the all-time greatest head explosions. So, yeah, Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
Oh, we got to talk about Corey Feldman.
Yes, Corey Feldman, who is honestly fantastic in this movie. And it's one of those where like, oh, I get, like, as someone who like grew up with like the Goonies and stuff like that, and you know, like Gremlins and movies he popped up in, Lost Boys, Stand By Me. I didn't totally understand the Corey Feldman thing. This is one where you're like, oh, this is why this kid like had a career, right? Like, yeah. And it's a fucking shame, of course, because the industry is so terrible. He's gone through his own demons. That's a whole other thing. But he did he narrated the Crystal Lake Memories documentary we watched. He was the narrator for most of it. So he must have some affection for the franchise.
Yeah, well, he talks about it, because I do want to talk about 4, because I do think this one's kind of fun. If you end up liking these movies, I think 4 is one of the better ones, frankly. Yeah. Not a home run by any means. No. But it has enough weirdness in it where I'm like, I'm starting to get it more by this point,
you know what I mean? Here's the thing, where it's like, we go like, it takes the franchise a little while to get its footing. And I think people think, because the hockey mask finally shows up in 3, I think people think what people mean is that it takes until the 3rd movie for things to come together, and that's not really the case. Like, honestly, you can almost dump the first 3 overboard, and as far as I'm concerned. Here it's like, I think 4, 5, and 6 are like a pretty good ramp up, in my opinion. 5 maybe debatable, but we'll get to that. But I think it's still very uneven, but it's a better starting position than I think 1, 2, or 3. But that's just my opinion.
We'll get to 5. Yes. But for 4, like, yeah, Corey Feldman really is terrific as a kid actor. He also said in the documentary, very candidly, that he actually wanted to, even though they all knew Friday the 13th, the final chapter, was teed up to be the final one. And then some people were like, well, if this makes money, we can just keep this going. Yeah. And Corey Feldman and some other people also wanted to keep it going. Corey Feldman wanted to do more, and he was like, he got a little protective of the character of Tommy Jarvis, who was a fan favorite in this franchise, played by 3 separate actors in every appearance. And I mean, Corey Feldman could not participate because he got called away with a Steven Spielberg contract to do stuff like the Goonies, Gremlins, and stuff like that. And I mean, look, those movies have significantly better reputations than Friday the 13th, but he does genuinely sound bummed that he couldn't like do this untold Friday the 13th Part 5 that they were teeing up.
Yeah, I don't know what you would have done, but it would have been interesting, I guess. You know, like it could have been something. But it's also, I think it's the same, like, it's the Danielle Harris problem of like Halloween 4, right? Like, where it's like that ending's like incredible, and then it's like, where do you go with that, right? Like, as much as I love Jamie Lloyd, the character, and Tommy Jarvis is fun too, it's kind of like hard to figure out what to really do with it. Because like they kind of don't figure out what to do with Tommy Jarvis until 6, right? Like 5, he's just kind of bumming around. But yeah, there's a lot of fucking pieces. But this one, I think there's a good the cast of characters here, I think, works a lot better than some of the other films, in my opinion. Kimberly Beck, I think, does a very good job as the lead. I think she's retired now as an actress, or at least hasn't worked in a while. But she's a pretty good lead. Crispin Glover is in this, who they just is already establishing himself as a fucking weirdo. Where's the corkscrew? This is a great moment.
No, it's not where's the corkscrew. He goes, where's corkscrew?
Is that what
Which
he says?
is even funnier. I swear to God, no one else is talking about this. Watch the fucking clip. I'm not saying this out of anger. I am genuinely astonished. No one else talks about how strange this is. He says, where's corkscrew?
But he also says it like, I think people treat it like it's one line. He says it like 3 times, though. Like, he's like calling out to someone, and he says the corkscrew thing like 3 times, and then he gets stabbed with it, right? Like...
Yeah, well, the last one he goes is, where's corkscrew? Or where's goddamn corkscrew? It's not like a full sentence, and just the truncated nature of it makes it very funny. Also because we all know Crispin Glover is an odd duck, to say the least.
I'll say this. Here's the line, and this is on IMDb, which isn't to be trusted, but the version they have written down is, "Hey Ted, where's that corkscrew? That fancy corkscrew for the wine bottle. Ted, hey, Ted, hey, Ted, where the hell is the corkscrew?" And then he gets stabbed. So that's the way it's written on IMDb. I did not pick up on what you were saying at all. So
I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay. Are you sure it's not just a video you had online?
I will fucking. It's in the Red Letter Media one too when they covered this.
I know, but
the clip.
I did just watch that too, and I did not pick that up at all. So I don't know what's going on in my head.
I feel like I'm being gaslit by the world.
But he does get stabbed with that corkscrew.
Yeah, he goes, Ted, hey Ted, where the hell's corkscrew?
Mm-hmm. All right,
I'll
go with you.
It's fine. It's fine. I'm not making a big deal about it, even though I clearly am. But it's. You know.
It is one where I'm like, that didn't happen. Like, I can't picture it in my head. So, but maybe you're right. If you're right, play the clip here. Like, play it right here. If I'm correct, you gotta fucking.
I'm gonna play it right here. I'm gonna play it at the beginning, and I'm gonna play it at the end.
All right.
People must know the truth.
All right.
And then watch, everyone's gonna fucking gaslight me and be like, "No, Diego, he clearly says, where's that corkscrew?"
I almost feel like
myself.
I almost feel like you're fucking with me, honestly, but
no.
Ted, hey Ted, where the hell's the corkscrew?
I'll say this: when every now and then, like, the franchise will get like a real actor in there, like someone who goes on to have an actual career, like Crispin Glover. And it unfortunately underlines like why some of these people maybe didn't have huge careers after these movies. Someone like, that first one, no offense to the cast of the first one, but like Kevin Bacon is like kind of acting the rest of the teens off the screen in that first movie. It's just like he's got such a natural charisma. And even someone like Crispin Glover, who is playing a weirdo, he's making choices that will be valuable for someone like him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like he's going up against he's the guy who's like Ted, his buddy, was in The Last American Virgin, the Cannon Films comedy, and he's being big with it, right? Like he's like he's laughing way too much at that fucking movie they're watching, and he's very big with it. He's doing what maybe someone not as tapped into the acting abilities would do with a role like that. And honestly, like Corey Feldman like gives a good performance in this, which is like kind of surprising. But that seems to happen with child actors, though, where like, you know, they start off really good and then the industry destroys them because it's evil, and then they're not good ever again. But hey.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like another actor who's like really good when they're young. Oh, the Home Alone kid.
Yeah, Macaulay Culkin's great in those fucking Home Alone movies, and
Yeah, and he just popped up in Righteous Gemstones like a season ago or something like
oh
that. And he was pretty
yeah,
good, but he he doesn't have like a meaty role or anything
yeah,
like that.
yeah, and they've tried to do the thing with bringing him back a few times, and like either like he just doesn't have it or like the drive, or they just can't find the right role for him. You know, like he's totally serviceable. He's just not like he's not. There's not going to be like a reclamation on him, like at least right now. At least right now, that's what it looks like. Whereas like Crispin Glover, you could see that like someone gives him a role at some point in the next few years that like the Academy just like throws him an Oscar just to get it over with. But where's that guy been? He hasn't done anything in a while.
Oh no. Where are you? Come back to us.
He was Pikmin in Pikmin's model for Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. I gotta watch that.
That's right.
Man. I gotta watch that.
Yes.
Pikmin's model is one of my favorite Lovecraft stories, so I definitely gotta see that.
Maybe get that one out of the way.
All right. I mean, whatever. That's a hard one to do, honestly.
It is.
That story is so much about the final line of the story. You know, like it's hard to do as a film. But I still, you know what? That'll probably be on the list. I have all the stuff I want to watch for Halloween, and I had to fucking wait with it because I was doing this goddamn shit. So
yeah. Like every anthology,
we've talked
Cabinet of
about
Curiosities is great. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this, but I'll have to check it out. You know. Also, we get Ted White, who also recently passed last year, almost a year ago. It'll be a year ago this Saturday. Passed away. He plays Jason in this movie, and he feels like the first guy to actually bring some character to Jason.
Like it's the first attempt at making him kind of a slasher icon, you know.
Yeah, it's funny that they still haven't really hit on the like Jason is the franchise, but he played Gillman, the creature from the Black Lagoon, in Revenge of the Creature, which I think is the second Creature from the Black Lagoon movie. Which is also the film debut of Clint Eastwood, who has like 2 lines in it. His interview in Crystal Lake Memories is pretty fucking fun because he's like such an old school guy, and he's talking about like I was working with these damn kids. Like he was just like they would be like, "You gotta do this," and I would tell them like, "You can't do it that way." Like it was just funny to hear this like older guy talking about like it's like. You played the creature from the Black Lagoon, and now you're now you're Jason. Like, it's an interesting one.
I mean, it's like the legacy of like a horror, you know. It's the evolution, I guess, of it. Like, it used to kind of have a budget, or you know what? Maybe not even a budget, just it maybe bigger producers behind it.
Mm-hmm. It feels like these first 4 they hit kind of some of the same beats in terms of the kills.
Yeah, I mean, look, I will say I think the reason you've been trying to get us to move on from these first 6 basically, and we're only on 4, is because you are kind of correct in that the franchise at least doesn't get interesting to talk about until part 6. So we could.
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure if I'm trying to get on. I just. Like, what do we talk about, honestly? Like, if you think there's more to talk about, I'm willing to stop for each movie. Like, I really just don't, like, have a take on them.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at, too.
Like, if you got anything, go ahead. I will talk about it. I just...
No. 4 is kind of fun. I found charms in part 1. More than I ever have. I still don't really care for it. And part 2, I think I still kind of enjoy. Just less than 1 now, which I didn't really expect. Part 4, good enough time. Part 5, I don't think it really works. I do kind of admire the idea to like, okay, now we're gonna make a real whodunit, and also not really successfully do that whodunit, because it's also like no way to predict who did it. There's no the mystery is not solvable because you don't know the history of the characters. So
well, it's also again we're back and they don't know. They somehow don't realize that Jason is the franchise now. Like, we're on the 5th movie and they don't seem to understand that, right? Like, it's Jason. It's not. It seems like the producers keep thinking the reason people are watching these movies is to see teens hacked up, and it's like that's not inaccurate, but it's also like if that were true, then why is it doing better than like these other slasher franchises, right? Like it can't just be the name recognition, and they can't seem to hit on that it is Jason. They try to it's a weird like it's this early era of like franchises don't normally go this long in the 80s. Like this is kind of a new thing to be up to. Part 5, it's basically a joke, and so it's kind of similar to like, well, we can't do 3 movies with Michael Myers. We got to mix it up when we get to the fucking when we get to the 3rd one, and then it's like, we liked that movie, but no one liked it at the time. So yeah. Also, this is the one where I think like everyone just kind of like hated making this movie. Like it was. I think people were really unhappy with A New Beginning.
Yeah, when it's the 5th movie in the franchise of 10 movies in total called A New Beginning, it's like that's fucking wild. That I mean, honestly, it's just very funny to talk about in hindsight. Like, oh yeah, the final chapter, Part 4, Part 5, A New Beginning, Part 6, Jason Lives.
Yeah.
Now we know this is the franchise.
And there's literally there. Yeah, but like Part 5, it's literally like this. These movies come out over a 3-year period. Like it is final chapter, New Beginning, Jason Lives. Like that's how quick it was. It's like the fucking death of Superman where he was dead for like 2 weeks. Like it's just that's how this shit works. But I think this is the one where the one producer was like, with the 5th one, like we basically shot a porno in the woods. I think was the comment, like that it was essentially like everyone like seemed to hate the director. No one seemed to have anything happy to say. The director like picked actresses based on like their boob size and stuff like that.
That's like the ultimate skeevy sleazy. Yeah, like ew.
Yeah, it's I think it's the story where one of the actresses in this like had been cast, got passed over because the director was like her boobs aren't big enough, and then she ended up in 6 as like one of the main characters. So it's there's a lot of stuff like that.
Well, that works because
Tommy Jarvis
Part
is
6
back.
is significantly better than Part 5.
Yeah, but Tommy Jarvis is back in 5, and it's also this weird thing of like, oh, like Halloween Ends feels like the more I think about it, was like that's not just David Gordon Green like trying to do Halloween right. It's like he's trying to like do stuff that he wanted to. He must be a horror fan. Like it feels like the more when I was rewatching these movies, I realized that there were references in the Halloween movies he did that weren't just to Halloween. They were to like other slasher films, right? Like I feel like he has a real understanding and nostalgia for the genre, but also that thing that happens when you love something where you're like, oh, but I wish they had actually gone through with this idea. And this movie kind of plays with the idea of, is Tommy the killer? And of course he isn't, because they're not going to reveal that 5 seconds in. But there's the constant, like, what is Tommy Jarvis's, like, connection to Jason and shit like that. Also, complicating the matters is Jason isn't even in Part 5.
Yeah, it's a copycat killer.
It's the second ambulance driver.
Shocking twist. Oh, we're going to spoil all these, by the way. If you couldn't tell from the second hour of this, I was going to say commentary track, but whatever.
Yeah. The fucking, it was the second ambulance driver. The kid, because his kid got hacked up. What is that scene?
I don't know.
When he's like, you want a candy bar? Like... What is that moment in this movie?
It's a desperate attempt at clawing for like sympathy for a character, and then making you kind of depressed because it was like, this is kind of like, where did that come from?
No, but here's the thing. He is so fucking annoying. You're like I'm trying to imagine like watching this movie with no context, him being like, well, fine, if you're not gonna take my candy bar, then I'm just gonna leave. And I just imagine like being in the audience in like 1985 and being like, holy shit, someone fucking killed this guy. And then he immediately gets killed and you're like, holy shit, they actually did it. Like, it's a, you know, I had zero sympathy for that fucker.
I don't know, he's
like,
annoying, but it's like, you know, just a guy.
I'm not saying he deserved to get hacked up by an axe, but that is the franchise we're watching. Like, he wasn't gonna make it. Like, he was gonna go down at some point. It's just, you don't expect it to be like fucking 10 minutes in, and Jason, even fake Jason, doesn't even kill him. It's just some guy. What is that scene?
I don't know. I mean, I think part 5 really does feel desperate. I mean, that is kind of the thing. I think maybe that's the worst one of the bunch up to this point. It does feel kind of lifeless to me.
I don't know. 5 has like weird comedy stuff that like doesn't work but makes it fascinating.
I don't know, fascinating.
You know?
It is very annoying.
I find the fucking this is the one with the enchiladas, right? Oh, damn enchiladas! Like, I don't know. I think I disliked 3 more than this one. I think I really didn't like 3D. But there's I don't know. There's something like it. This one's kind of like it pushes into like it's so bad it's kind of like interesting in my opinion. And it does feel like it was like the last time they wanted to take a chance. That's actually not true.
Oh, fucking do they?
But it's the last remnant of them like not knowing what to do with the
fifth
franchise, one. You know, it's exactly. It's fucking bizarre that it just keeps and it just kept making money, like, but it's pretty bad. I think this has the highest death count though, which is crazy. Like up to this point,
it's psychotic.
I'm seeing here it's 22 people are listed as killed, but it looks like 3 of them are dream sequences. A few of them are off camera. And one of them isn't even really Jason, and then the other one isn't even the movie isn't even really Jason. You know, I want to give a shout out to a scene in part 4 that I actually thought was really effective. When the male love interest gets killed. Is that who he is? Like where he's like kind of the last person before it turns into the final showdown between the final girl and Jason, where they're kind of just running around for most of it. Where he like tells her to run, and we don't see it. It's like it's weird. We're like this franchise known for like its violence. I think it's one of the most brutal kills, and we don't even see anything. Where he's just like. Jason's just like stabbing him in the corner, and the guy's just screaming, "He's killing me!" like over and over again as he's dying. Like I think it's a genuinely effective kill in this movie, where like in a way that like some of the more visceral stuff doesn't always connect, you know. Which I just thought that was kind of fascinating.
There's always moments, I guess, in this franchise where it's like that's kind of something. That's an idea. That's you know. It is a result. Of a desperate attempt to keep a franchise afloat. Like, that is ultimately there. But I do love that people have latched onto it as, like, you know, like with a real sense of love and, like, even, like, protectiveness, you know, over these movies.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's... If I had paid money to see it in 1980, whatever... I probably would have been pissed off to pay for a Friday the 13th movie and not gotten Jason, right? Like, because I don't think there's anything really thematic here to justify him not being in it. You know, it's not like, oh, this movie's actually making some statement about the evil that can be infected within all of us that it spreads like Jason. It's like, no, they kind of wanted to just do the first movie again. Like, that's really what it comes down to. And it's, but like, remember from it as like just this movie, it's like it's totally serviceable, right? Like it's just a slasher movie, and in that respect, it's fine. But hey, got anything else to say about?
No,
5?
I'm ready to talk about my second favorite. Maybe.
Who's the guy playing Tommy?
Oh
Jarvis
yeah,
in this
John
one?
Shepard takes over Tommy. Corey Feldman has a cameo at the beginning. That's it. John Shepard takes over for this movie.
Yeah.
And then
they don't really give John Shepard anything to really
No.
do either. So it's not the He's kind of just like it's like a red herring, but like he's also the protagonist. Like it's not a great
but then
choice.
he also does not return
yeah.
in the next film, Friday 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, directed by Tom McLaughlin. And now Tommy Jarvis is played by someone named Tom Matthews.
Yes, he was in Return of the Living Dead.
That's a great movie.
I think that's his big movie before this. Yeah. He's also in Return of the Living Dead 2 as like a completely different character, but that's a whole other thing. And Albert Pune's Alien from LA, so
I actually like that movie quite a bit.
Shout out to Albert Pune.
Yes.
No, that's a great movie.
People were really mean about that actress and her voice. I was reading some of the older reviews and I was like, it's clearly for kids. Like, leave her alone.
Yeah. People used to write insane things in reviews for movies.
It's not an opinion; it's a fact. People. I just read that Gene Siskel quote: "A primordial response to women's rights movements." That's psychotic.
Well, yeah. He writes it, and then like he gave out like Betsy Palmer's like mailing address
Fucking
in his
Christ.
review, being like write to her and tell her that what she's doing here is morally repugnant, like telling listeners that. I mean, he did that a few times. There's a few of that where he would call for the people who made these movies to like go to prison. Like that's like he was like, these people are evil. When the Silent Night Deadly Night controversy happened, he listed the producers by name and like said shame on you, like live on the air. Like he took it as like a real crusade. And like that's the stuff from like Siskel and Ebert that is just aged like fucking milk. Like it's like that's the one where you look back and it's like these guys set the horror genre back by like fucking 20 years, and they're not even that they had to like these movies, they were just like way too against them, like they didn't seem to. And it's I think it's like a weird, I don't know, there's so much writing about like there's like fucking men, women, and chainsaws and shit like that that's like talks about like the male gaze and like the violence in these movies, and I'm not smart enough to I don't know, refute any of that, but it's never been how I like fuck how I feel, right? Like that doesn't really matter, but it's like women love horror movies as much as men, right? Like maybe I would have to go back to 1986. Maybe if it was 1986 and I go to see like one of these movies in theaters, it's like an all male audience and they're like cheering like psychopaths anytime a woman is cut up, right? Like, and like maybe that was the vibe at the time. But like looking like back, I honestly feel like I see more women defending the Friday the 13th movies than men. Like, and then of course on top of that, they're the women who just want to have sex with Jason, but that's a whole other thing. I don't know. I like that weird sort of like. The take that these movies are, I don't, like abnormally sexist. I don't think they are, like I'm not saying they're not at all, but I feel like that like there were plenty of other movies at the time that were on the same level. They just weren't horror movies with as much sex and nudity and then also violence. Like it's I don't know. I'm not smart enough to talk. Like, what do you?
I don't think you're out of line.
Like,
I
don't
early
know.
on in this episode, we were making fun of like the sort of girl boss mentality of modern movies, where it's like, see, they're independent and strong because they don't have friends and they don't love anyone. And it's like, that is sexist in its own way. Like, it's just a different form of sexism. And that's obviously not all movies right now. There's a lot of great progressive stuff happening in smaller spaces.
No, there always is. It's just, it's harder to find it, and it's harder to... It doesn't get as much attention as some
it has
other
always
movies,
been out there. It's always been available to find. It's always been hard to find. But I do think right now, while it's also really difficult to find, it's also never been easier to just stumble across with stuff like YouTube, Vimeo, TikTok, which again, not perfect platforms by any means, but I mean, it's possible to just stumble upon stuff there, and just be like, hey, hang on. Like there's stuff.
And I don't know, it feels like we're getting like better at discussing this stuff, where like there's always that contingent that just like hates the idea of women being leads in movies, right? Like they haven't really gone away, which is frustrating. But it feels like we've gotten better at like discussing like when it's done poorly, and not feeling like we have to defend every movie because there's also that weird like shouty segment of the population. I don't know. It feels like people are getting a little... I don't know. Maybe... Like, I'm always, like, waiting to see, like, is a movie going to come down the pipe that's, like, just overtly sexist and it's going to make, like, $1 billion, right? Like, I'm always worried that day might come in the future. I mean, no, that movie's... But that movie is, like, a weird... like subtle sexism.
Yeah, and it was also
saying?
clearly like accidental. It was trying to be progressive, and it just was actually very mean.
Yeah.
Like it's these circumstances tend to be like not
no
in intent.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I don't think I have no evidence that Colin Trevorrow is malicious, but I don't think he realizes that he judges his female characters way more harshly than his male characters.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like a guy who isn't like an asshole, but also will like talk over women at parties, and he's not doing it maliciously. He doesn't think he doesn't think he's discrediting her in any way, but for some reason when he feels the need to do it, right? And I think that's more the Trevorrow vibe. But I'm talking about like if a movie comes down the pipe that is like very like, I don't know, like that is just like overtly like men are like this, women are like this, like Back in the Kitchen type movies, where like it doesn't really feel like that's happening. Like I guess the closest is fucking Top Gun Maverick, but even that is like I don't think that's really like that's not even the biggest problem with that fucking movie, but who knows? It's that thing of like I feel like right now it's just because of where the culture's at right now with like the weird backlash to like progressivism and stuff like that that's happening in conservative circles and all the book bans and stuff. Part of what I feel like I'm watching is like, are they attempting to put toothpaste back in the tube, which is like you can't do that, right? Like, are they trying to wind the clock back and it's just too late? Like the culture has moved far enough ahead that they can't do it. Like that's the real question I'm feeling right now, and I don't have an answer. I don't know, I don't know if it will be successful, but like it's where the culture's at, which I'm not sure.
No, I think it does. I think it does because we watch the culture change and evolve and end up realizing that Friday the 13th Part 6 Jason Lives kind of does rule as like a drive-in movie.
No, okay. This is the one I like. I really liked Friday the 13th Part 6. It's the one where it's like if you're like, if I only want to watch one, I would say Part 6. Like, and you would be totally fine. Like, these movies aren't that complicated. Even with this being the culmination of the Tommy Jarvis
quote unquote
trilogy, there's enough dialogue in here to give you backstory that you can just jump in right with 6. And this feels like it is Jason fully formed as a horror icon. This is when he fully goes supernatural. He's brought back from the dead like a fucking like he's the Frankenstein
the lightning bolt
monster.
and fucking
like,
everything.
This
It's
yeah, it's like his grave explodes. It's this is like the fully formed idea of Jason, and I think this movie I think this movie, honestly, of the franchise, I think this one just top to bottom just works.
yes, I think this is the one that works.
I mean, it's an
completely.
86-minute
like
movie.
if you like this franchise, I can't imagine you
Yeah.
not loving this movie. Frankly,
Yeah, it's also one of the rare times one of these movies is like self-referential, like self-aware, without it feeling obnoxious. You know, it's I mean, this is the one. It has the fucking James Bond opening, right? And there's a couple lines in it where it's like, if you run into a guy on a dark road like this, it never ends well. You know, like kind of comments like that. But it never crosses that line some lamer versions of this movie would, right? Like where it's just a movie where like it has the right amount of sense of humor about itself that I think it really helps the movie. It also really helps that like when people get killed, it's actually entertaining as opposed to like
that's
miserable, you know?
It's
What was it?
yeah.
Like, well, you know, like there is something where there's a moment where the girl who has sex in the RV with her boyfriend, and they think they're stuck. They get the RV started again. They start driving away, but it turns out Jason has snuck in, and she just gets yanked into the bathroom. And there's like an extended scene of her like struggling in his arms, and you see like the look of terror on her face, and it culminates in her face getting crushed into the wall, and like you see the imprint of her face, right? Like that could genuinely be miserable because she's also like a fairly likable character in that moment, and the movie has like the right enough tone that it's entertaining, and it's not like you're not like sitting there like, yeah, fucking killer. It's like, well, of course this is what happens in this movie. Like that's what this movie is, you know? It's entertaining. And then you know, that's the famous, like he stabs the guy while driving the RV. The RV flips and like Jason climbs off. That's great stuff. There's so many hero shots of Jason in this movie.
It's so great with like the fog and the lighting and the rain.
Yeah.
And it's just like, God, it's the shit. It really is the shit. Now, I have to admit, earlier this summer in 2023, I went to a 6-feature horror film marathon on 16mm. Every film presented in 16mm. The first film, Friday 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, and I was like, all right, we're starting with my favorite Friday movie. I'm not a fan of this franchise. It really hit me as I was watching this movie that I do enjoy and would recommend to slasher fans. I did start nodding off with the first movie. And that is completely just me not really vibing with this franchise. It's completely me. And I knew I wasn't tired because I was very excited to do this with a friend of the show, A.B. Allen, excellent writer, filmmaker in their own right. And after that, every other movie after this, I was wide awake. Not an ounce of caffeine, nothing changed in my body or in the environment around me other than I wasn't watching a Friday the 13th movie. So I think my barometer is pizza movie nights. I will say are the only place I can do these now.
But this was I think I texted you like a few days ago where I was like, oh God, I think we're fucked, because like they were all the movies were starting to blend together to me. I had made it through like 5 of them, and I was like kind of regretting the decision to do this because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have anything to talk about. And then 6 kind of came along, and it was such a refreshing movie to watch after the first 5 ones. So, like, it might only work in that context, right? Like, it might only really work as well as it did for me as the 6th in a marathon that I wasn't really enjoying, right? Like, so I can't, who knows? I might throw it on again and not totally vibe with it, but this was the one I kind of enjoyed the most. It's like 6 and 4 are the 2 that I'm kind of like I'm good with, you know.
And you know what you mentioned the kills in this, like they're much more thrilling. Like they really feel more like set pieces than just either chase sequence or stab sequences as well. Also, I believe this is the first instance of the camp fucking having kids in it.
Well, yeah, that's the other element that I think really helps this, is that there are children in peril in this movie. Like that it's a real like practical like, you know, cuz it's such a weird thing cuz the setting is so good of a campsite, and you have to like the unspoken thing I think about a franchise like this is that like a huge chunk of the target audience is honestly children, right? Like I think kids watch these movies even though they're not supposed to. It's just what happens. And I think as much as I like Corey Feldman in 4, I think it's a mistake to make a kid like that like as prominent as he is. I think they got lucky that it worked so well that time. But I think the better choice is to just have kids like ever present in the movie as like, yeah, they're at a campsite and they're in danger as well. You don't have to fucking kill the kids, but it's just it adds another layer to it. And I think that's also what really helps this movie is that going into the third act when people are like, oh shit, it's Jason. Normally when we get to that point in the movie, it's just Jason and the final girl that are basically left, right? So then it's just a lot of running around. There's like a few people going into the climax, and it's a lot of like, you go get the kids, you do this, you do that, and like the sheriff is like, my daughter, right? Like he's got to do something. So like there's a lot of tension in that as well that is just missing when you get to those other movies where like you get to the latter half and it's just a lot of running. And it's something that it's embarrassing that this is the only one that really hit on. Yeah, have it set at a fucking summer camp. Like have the camp actually be in operation this time. Because I think this is the only one.
It is,
it's the
and
only one with the kids.
A couple more things, and then we can move on. Because again, this is the one we're excited about. Clearly, they don't just limit it to kids in the camp. There's like that corporate paintball game going on, and so you get Jason kind of like he gets his machete from there, I think, or something like that, right? Like he doesn't even start with that. He starts with the big spear that Tommy Jarvis uses to try to like make sure he's dead, and that accidentally brings him back to life and all that stuff with the lightning bolt, which is great.
Yes. He kills the person from Welcome Back, Kotter. There's a lot going on here. But yeah, he uses the spear for a little bit. And here's where like it really clicked for me. It was like, oh, this is the one I caught on TV. I remembered the guy's face getting smashed into the tree, but in this movie it says his face gets smashed into the tree and he makes a smiley face covered in blood, right? Like that's all that really happens. In my mind's eye, for whatever reason, when I was a kid, I remember it as Jason smashes this guy's face into the tree and the guy's face gets ripped off and sticks to the tree. Like, for the longest time, that's what I thought happened in that scene. I vividly remember that.
There's also that great bit, anyone who listens to the Dead Meat, or watches the Dead Meat YouTube channel, everyone knows this is where they get their namesake from, with those kids who are like, they're like, we're fucked, basically, right? The kids are so funny in this.
Yeah.
And that one kid's like, what do you think?
Oh, yeah.
I think we're dead meat. Like, it's hysterical. They're like, well... Jason's here. So
what'd you want to be when you grew up? Like, that's a great line.
That is amazing.
Yeah. And I also, the triple decapitation is great. Like, there's so much good stuff in this one. It's the one where, like, if I'm trying to be like, what is the, like, if I gotta, because, like, I'm always like, when it's Halloween season, I want to, represent all the guys, right? Like, I want all the boys to get some representation. So it's like, you got to get like Lugosi in there, you got to get Dracula, you got to get Frankenstein, you got to get Peter Cushing, like you got to like all these guys. And I'm like, Jason deserves at least one spot in there. And I was trying to be like, yeah, but like which one? Where it's like with like Freddy, I could be like, yeah, the first 4, right? Like the first 4 or 5 of those movies, like just do those, you know. Whereas this, it was like, I'm like, what the fuck do you? And it's like, no, I could see myself as like part of a marathon, like on Halloween night, just like throwing 6 on, you know. And it I think this one just really works in a way a lot of the other ones do. There's occasionally some restraint with the kills, which is restraint on a curve with this franchise. There's the one girl who basically gets killed partially off camera, but then we see the aftermath of the cabin just destroyed, which is really good. Yeah, there's so much good stuff in this one. I recommend it. And then it has the coolest, I think the coolest ending to the movie, which is him getting trapped under the water, but then like he's still alive. It's just like he could surface at any moment, which is, I think, exactly the type of vibe a movie like this should have, right? Like, this is, if you're describing the kid who Jason is, you're like, he's in the fucking lake, like, all the time. If he comes out of that lake, we're all dead. Like, that should be the vibe of, like, Jason when you're a kid, like, when you're thinking about who Jason is, Where it's like, Freddy, don't go to sleep. Fucking Halloween, don't Halloween. Like there's always like rules, like where it's like how, like, don't summon these guys, don't do this shit, and I think that's the one which
it makes him mythical finally.
Yeah, it's finally like, it's like, this is what he should have been, like, from day one. It took him until film 6 to get it, but this one I responded to really strongly.
So naturally, we have to respond unstrongly to Jason versus Carrie. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood.
An incredibly weird pivot. John Carl Buechler directed this one. The late Con Carl Buechler, who's mostly a special effects guy. Had done, like, Reanimator and shit, but also a director in his own right. He did the original Troll, did Dungeon Master, did Ghoulies 3. Passed away just a little while ago, too. Like 2019. He's one of those guys, because he seemed really, he was always popping up in horror documentaries, which I kind of liked. I like guys like that, where, like, they'll just keep popping up in these movies no matter what. He was a big part of the Curse of Michael Myers special effects, which is this, he gives a really funny interview in one of the Halloween documentaries where he's like, he assembled, like, some of the best special effects people on Earth to do it, because they were originally going to make that movie really violent, and then they had to cut back, and he was like, everyone was really frustrated because all they got to do was, like, stab people in the movie. They didn't get a ton to do. But think about it, he does the effects in a single year period. He does the effects on Friday the 13th Part 7, this, which he directed, Nightmare 4, at Halloween 4, like, all in 1 year.
That's pretty
impressive.
Also, his work in all 3 of these films is remarkable. As director, I don't know if he's got a handle on everything. I will say, when this does become Carrie versus Jason, I do think it's too little too late, but if you're grading on a curve, it does deliver.
Yeah. Yeah, like, that part is really good. It's just unfortunate that, like, after 6 kind of, like literally put some new life into the series, this one, it falls back onto a lot of the same kind of tired tropes that we were already bored with the other movies, right? Like, it just feels like, oh, we're suddenly back to this shit again. Like, what the fuck? And it's a little depressing. It just has this added element of, like, there's a psychic girl in the movie, which is a swing that I appreciate, honestly, but it doesn't totally pay off in the way you'd want it to. It's this one, I don't know. I wanna like it more than I do. I kind of feel that way about, like, honestly, like, a lot of the post-6 ones. Like, I want to like them more than I like them.
Because this is kind of a crazy pivot. You do tell people, like, oh yeah, this is the one where they try to make, like, a Carrie versus Jason spinoff happen. People, like, normal people don't know that, and if you explain that to someone who does know Stephen King, and especially the Carrie movie, they're gonna be like, I'm sorry, what? And you can get an interesting conversation out of that. But it's not that engaging to watch, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's kind of a shame. It's one of those where you wish, like, they had maybe, I don't know, like, had a little more time to develop it. Although I think this is the rare like 2-year gap between releases. So, yeah, it's But I do remember. Yeah, I think it is. I think you're right though. I think when it finally does turn into Carrie versus Jason, that's the best stuff in the movie.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Without a doubt. Like, there's no real competition with anything else in the movie.
It's not totally like worthless as a movie, right? Like it's still got some stuff in there. It's just there's so many of the people in this one are kind of just faceless, in terms of their deaths in this movie. Although this does have the initial sleeping bag death, that is a fairly popular one. With getting picked up and slammed against the tree. I know that's a big one with fans. Although this is infamously the one where the MPA really cracked down on it. Although that Crystal Lake Memories documentary made it very clear that 7 wasn't... Like, all of the movies basically have an X-rated version that just never got released because of the MPAA. And they weren't thinking at the time of preserving that footage, so we likely will never see the uncut versions of all these movies. But especially 7, where, like... right when you think it's about to get violent, it kind of doesn't, which can be a little frustrating.
Did you know several high-profile directors were considered for this film, including Federico Fellini?
I read that. I can't believe
I'm
that's
sure they
actually
considered
true.
it.
Like,
that doesn't mean he considered it. That's like when you hear, hey, they reached out to Steven Spielberg for Fantastic Four, for the MCU's Fantastic Four. I believe they reached out to him. I also believe he missed their call. I'll get back to you guys.
Yeah.
And never did.
Or I said, like, yeah, I'll have a meeting. Drive 8 hours outside of the city to this specific location, and then he just never showed up. And was as a way to be like, never contact me again. Spielberg's got to have some way of, like, fucking with people. That if people, like... It's like his way of being like, how dare you ask me to even work on this project?
Although he did direct Ready Player One.
Yeah, but I think he wanted to do that ultimately. Like he was there. When you watch that movie, you can tell what parts of it were interesting to him. Like, there's a lot of other stuff that he's less interested in. But I think there was a part of him that. It was in his mind. It was his Willy Wonka, like, which is I think that's overtly what that movie was trying to be for him. So, although he was gonna do there's that famous was it Black Hawk for DC, like which he tried to do in like the late 80s, and then like when the DC, like they tried like at some point like the DC. When it was like spinning its tires was like, Spielberg's back, we're gonna do it, like we're finally gonna do it, and he wants to do it. Like they made like 7 announcements in a row that were insane, and then I don't think any of those
David
came to
Goyer was
fruition,
just on that one podcast, and David Goyer is an interesting guy. I don't hate David Goyer. He was talking about like, or he was asked candidly about like what it was like working with Man of Steel. He was, and I believe the guy Josh Horowitz from the Happy Sad Confused podcast asked him point blank, would you have preferred to do Man of Steel 2 instead of Batman vs Superman? He was like, yes, of course. Because it kind of sounds like those announcements for other movies happened at the same time the actual creatives found out about them. And they were like, well, we don't have any scripts yet.
Yeah, no,
and they're like, we're doing it, baby. And it's like, yeah, no, we saw the writing on the wall. Like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. No, that's why the DCU didn't work, because they just were like, you're in a DC universe now, like, and they're making the same fucking mistake again. It's insane, but hey,
yeah,
what the fuck?
Yeah, whatever, it's fine. I'm sure there's stuff I'm gonna like and stuff I'm not gonna like, but whatever. I wonder if I'm gonna like anything as much as I like Friday the 13th Part 8. Jason Takes Manhattan.
So are you a defender of this movie? Okay.
I don't really like it. I don't hate it, though, anymore. I used to hate it because the title is a lie.
Yeah, it's. I think it's just one of those things where it was a budget reason he couldn't really be in Manhattan. And the actual like getting him to Manhattan took up so much time that they didn't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that was a big problem with it. I feel like there should be like what they really should have done was made a movie that's not Jason Takes Manhattan, that's like on the boat, and then the ending, the reveal is that he's in Manhattan, right? Like, like he kills all these people on a boat. The boat sinks at the end of the movie. You think Jason's gone or heroes have gotten away, but then you see, you're at like Liberty Island, and you see someone coming out of the water, and like he just looks over and like sees the Manhattan skyline in front of him, and then you do Jason Takes Manhattan, right?
Yeah, if that was the trajectory the film took and they didn't announce the Manhattan section, this would be, I think, a fan favorite. It doesn't mean I would like it anymore.
Well, that's the problem, is that like you hear Jason Takes Manhattan and you're like, fucking take my money.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, yeah, I want to see him fucking like going up against like New York City cops and shit. Like, I want to see like someone like every New York stereotype imaginable and just have Jason murder them. And then it's like most of the movie's on a fucking boat. Like,
yeah.
It's just...
Because look, like Jason on a boat isn't a terrible idea either. That is a change up in setting. That's like, okay, you're trying something different, you know? Like,
although
in
this
terms
might
of this
have,
franchise.
This might have my absolute favorite Friday the 13th kill. My favorite Jason kill in all the movies.
We may agree.
So there's the one guy who the guy who's like, he thinks, you know what would be a good idea, to try and fight Jason. And he's like punching Jason. It feels like it goes on a long time of him like basically like fighting Jason and like punching himself tired, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're on a rooftop, right? Like,
yeah.
And it's going on. It keeps going. Jason's like, it's unaffected. Jason backs this guy right up to the edge of the building. It's like he's right at the ledge. And the guy's like, give me your best shot. So obviously Jason's going to punch this guy off the building. No. Jason punches his head off, which goes flying and lands in a trash can. Why that was the choice, I have no fucking idea, but it was a hell of a choice.
But that is incredible. I mean, that is one of those kills, especially around Halloween season, that just gets so much play online. People are like, can you believe this? Or like, this is why I will defend Jason Takes Manhattan, or something like that, right? Like,
yeah.
Woo.
I also remember this one I have a lot of actual memories of. I remember watching this for the first time, because I remember like the title was intriguing. I remember this being part of the marathon. I think I fell asleep right after the guy got his head punched off.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the like rocker chick who gets killed pretty early in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm also like you know, in this age, I'm like, that's the girl that I'm interested in. So of course she dies like 5 minutes. Hey, you know, that's what it was. The 80s. Yeah. They do a lot. There's also the blondie looking girl in the one movie too, like where I think, is that 5 too? I think 5, yeah, because that also has the guy who's like basically a weird cross between Michael Jackson and Eddie Murphy, but yeah, they would keep putting like weird, because the girl in this is like J.J. Jarrett, like it's like clearly a reference, but yeah, she gets killed in the boat fairly early.
Mm-hmm.
But
I want to mention the film was directed by Rob Hedden, I believe. A resident of Laguna Beach, where they were raised. And I say that because that's not super far from me. And that's all I wanted to mention. That was it. He's directed some other stuff. If you're a millennial, you probably are familiar with the film Clock Stoppers, which he didn't direct, but he wrote the screenplay for.
Jonathan Frakes directed Clock Stoppers.
Yes. But Rob Hedden wrote the
crazy.
screenplay, and that I mentioned millennials remembering that film because that's the one with the Blink-182 song, First Date. Let's go, don't wait. No one.
That's in another movie.
It probably is, but that's the one that got like a lot of people like. It got me into Blink-182. That's what I'll say. It got me into Blink-182 at the time.
All right. We didn't mention though. We failed to mention in part 7 is that's the first appearance of Kane Hodder as Jason.
Oh yeah, apologies everyone and Kane Hodder.
Yeah,
I think he's kind of like the definitive Jason.
Yeah,
right?
he's the one who he brings a real sort of physicality to Jason that kind of becomes the staple of it. Although it feels like he keeps getting fucked in a lot of weird ways, where it's like Jason takes Manhattan, he doesn't get to fucking go to Manhattan. Like he's only there for like 2 minutes. The new blood, he gets his ass kicked by Carrie. Jason goes to hell, he dies 7 minutes into the movie. Like it's. Like the one where he really gets to show off is like Jason X, which it was apparently like kind of a real challenge for him because of like all the makeup he had to wear and shit like that. Mm-hmm. And then they don't even bother to use him for Freddy vs. Jason. So,
I will say, I think the Jason Takes Manhattan poster is a lot of fun. That's a cool poster. That's a fun poster.
The one that got banned.
Did it? New York has a new problem?
Oh no! There's I'm thinking of There's the I Love New York poster where it was I Love New York and it was Jason like cutting through it with the machete.
Oh.
And like apparently the New York Tourism Board sued when that happened.
Boring.
Yeah. When does that slogan get? That slogan gets started in like 1977. So I don't fucking know.
I don't know.
Scream.
Who is
does
the
it.
I will be honest. Like I mentioned this because Scream 6 also takes place in New York. I think Scream 6 is a vastly superior film. I wouldn't say it takes much more advantage of the New York setting, apart from the subway stuff.
This is the end of the Ed Koch era of New York City, which I feel is relevant to the people who know who Ed Koch is. So, Koch famously a lifelong bachelor, never married.
Do you know what films Jason Takes Manhattan went up against at the box office?
Hey, before you do all that, did you know he ran against Cuomo, the older Cuomo?
Oh, really?
Ed Koch, and because of the rumors about Ed Koch's sexual orientation, there was a slogan that went around that was, this is 1977, vote for Cuomo, not the homo.
Oh, boy.
So, good job, Cuomo.
Not a shining beacon of progressivism, in my opinion.
Yeah. Can't believe the Cuomos were just kind of allowed to hang around.
Yeah, that is strange. What the hell was that?
I mean, that's the weird dynasties of the Democratic Party that people are just cool with for some reason.
Yeah, well, because they're not Republicans, so they're the good guys, and it's hey, they could both be bad guys. Not all Democrats, I will say, but
But I just don't understand how you can be what's a good way to sell Hillary Clinton to the American people? To be it's her time to be president, fuckers, fall in line.
Or you hate
which
women.
was the entire tone. No, I mean, even removing that, but it was just that was the entire tone. The slogan's "I'm with her." No, I'm not. It's. I'm not doing this for her.
Yeah. It's healthcare's not free in this country.
Yeah, but no, it's just as someone who voted for Bernie Sanders, I didn't want Bernie Sanders to be president for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
I agreed with what he wanted to do. I'm not with Bernie. Like I just agree with what he's doing.
Yeah.
So
And it's like no one's really picked up the slack on that yet in the Democratic Party either, which is very concerning. It's like his slogan. Remember what it was? It was not me, us. Like, yeah, it's a good message. People like that message. Where'd it go?
What happened was Roe v. Wade got overturned, and now the Republicans have basically attached the tumor of anti-abortion to their party, which was never a popular opinion. And the Democrats realize they basically don't have to do anything now because they are now beating safe Republican seats by like 7 to 12 points sometimes because people are so freaked out about abortion getting overturned. Rightfully, people should have been freaked out before that happened, but it's now the Democrats realize, well, we don't actually have to do anything anymore. Like, now everyone is so afraid of the Republican Party that we have to do the bare minimum, and that's what we're going to do. So that's why that didn't get picked up.
I'm sure this will all end well.
I mean, I don't know.
It's going to be bad, and then it will literally end well. Like, I'm a long-term optimist.
Yeah.
But anyways,
it's one of those things where, like,
speaking of abortion, one of the movies Jason Takes Manhattan went up against at the box office was Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child.
Hey.
Which
fun movie.
I love that movie. Some people say it's pro-life. I disagree. There's no real Freddy Krueger trying to be reborn in your loins. It's a very specific situation that movie's got going on. It also went up against Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, and Friday Night Part 2, which is a film that's kind of been shoveled to the coattails of slasher horror movie history.
Yeah, why? What's going on with that one again? Like, it hasn't been released on, like, DVD, right?
It hasn't been released on a Blu-ray or DVD. Or I think there was a DVD, and then it went out of print, but the DVD was also, like, low quality. It was also, like, a pan and scan or something like that. It's cropped.
Yeah.
There are versions that were available on YouTube at one point that were the proper anamorphic CinemaScope frame. I downloaded a version of that because I can't have a physical copy of it. I will buy Fright Night Part 2. I like that movie a lot. But until that's available, I have a digital
what
copy.
You were doing, there's no excuse for what you're doing. It's still theft. And it's wrong. There is no justifiable reason. And I think just to get it off your hands, you should send it to me so you can clean your soul of the actions you have done.
You're absolutely right. I'll send it to you as soon as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm looking it up. It's the DVD is like $100.
Fuck that. Sorry.
Yeah. Especially if it's like not good condition.
Mm-hmm.
I'm checking. It's like it was released on Laserdisc as well. You can get the Laserdisc significantly cheaper, but it's also pan and scan.
Yeah. There is currently a version available on YouTube as well. The quality's not amazing, but it is a version of the movie that you could watch in its proper CinemaScope frame.
What is stopping it from getting a release? Like, just in this age where like it feels like every company on earth picks up these things, right? Like, like why is Fright Night Part 2 not getting it?
I don't know exactly, but I think it has to do with also why there's not a Fright Night Part 3. Roddy McDowell, who played what's his name? Peter Vincent. Yeah, great
Peter
Roddy
Vincent.
McDowell performance. Yeah. Great character in that franchise. Talked about it where they were ready to do a sequel. They knew Part 2 didn't really get like The World on Fire or whatever, but there was an unfortunate it bombed.
Well, it bombed.
But there was also a very unfortunate circumstance with Carolco Pictures chairman Jose Menendez. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Menendez and his wife were murdered by their sons,
Okay.
The Menendez brothers, Lyle and Eric. So,
But what does that have to
I
do
don't
with
think
the
anyone
rights
wants
of
to
the
dig that up
movie?
because Roddy McDowall loved this character and he wanted to reprise the role, and after that he was like,
But
I
they
don't
did.
want to do it
But
anymore.
but they did remake Fright Night, and that Fright Night remake got a sequel that went like direct to DVD. Like,
Yeah, that's strange. I don't know, but
what?
someone remastered Fright Night Part 2 because I didn't see that movie until like 2017 on
Yeah,
YouTube.
it's a good
and
movie.
It is, yeah. Tommy Lee Wallace, director of Halloween 3, director who definitely didn't get his shot in the spotlight, frankly, because he was a solid director, really solid craftsman, did a lot with very little. Yeah, I'm a fan of his. I wish he had a larger career, but
It
whatever.
was just like someone like Shout Factory, Vinegar Syndrome. Someone get on Fright Night Part 2. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't understand what's going on there.
Anyways, I like Fright Night Part 2 than Jason Takes Manhattan. So I like all those movies more than Jason Takes Manhattan. Maybe not Halloween 5. But Halloween 5, of course, has our favorite moment in cinematic history.
Yeah. Cut to it.
Okay, I feel like we can start winding down because we are in the tail end section of this franchise. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, again. Another final entry in this franchise. What are your thoughts on Jason Goes to Hell?
This is also where the rights start to splinter, because I believe this is New Line put this out. New Line got the rights to Jason, but not the name Friday the 13th, which is why this movie is called Jason Goes to Hell and not Friday the 13th part whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a big part of it. And that's why also, like, Jason X is the other one.
Yeah.
Part of it was that they were developing Freddy versus Jason. As basically, like, around the time of 6, they started trying to get that movie made. And this is one of the, like, the weird, like, we're trying to get Freddy vs. Jason made. We can't do it for whatever reason, but we got to do something. And Jason Goes to Hell is one of the movies that gets made. This is a baffling film, frankly. I don't know if it's good, but I kind of admire the swing.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's generally just a mistake that, like, Jason's not really in it, like, I'm sorry, it was like, you finally got your shit together, it's about Jason, and then it's like, what if he's a worm? Like, what if he's a hell worm? I do remember that VHS cover, though. Like, that one really stood out to me.
Yeah, I had no idea what the fuck that was, because it was like Jason Goes to Hell. I didn't know Friday the 13th Jason were the same thing. I just saw a mask and a creepy worm staring out at me, and I was like, what is that? With the tagline, evil has finally found a home. It's like, all right.
All right, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, Jason's a worm in this one. Well, we should mention, because at the end of Jason Takes Manhattan, he reverts back to his little kid form.
Yeah, thanks to some classic New York City toxic waste. The Secret of the Ooze.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
The fucking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It also reverts Jason back into a child, and also cures him of his disabilities, which I did not know toxic waste would also do that. But hey,
Yeah, that's how Trump survived the COVID-19 pandemic. After he got COVID, he was like, he just injected that New York toxic waste.
Remember when they put him in that limo and just had him, like, drive around the White House, like, and he looked like he was dying, and what we didn't know is that, like, just below the window was just like a pool of toxic waste that he was resting in. So
it's like those fucking those cryo chambers in Star Wars.
You know what? Even with everything insane about the Trump years, what makes the least amount of sense is that when clearly Trump was delirious after getting COVID and them giving him basically every drug imaginable to make sure he didn't die, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that they, like, had to, like, save him. They still wouldn't take his phone away to stop him from tweeting. Like, remember that, like, 3-day period where, like, he was, like, he just was, like, tweeting gibberish? Like, it was, like, we couldn't tell what the fuck was going on. Like, it was just, like, even by the Trump administration standards, that was insane. Like, I just, like, how, like, what is that? Like, no one could get the phone away from him? But, hey.
I just imagine
he's gonna be the nominee.
Totally, yeah. But I just imagine some security agents like, sir, you have to give us your phone, and he's like coughing at them to keep them away. He's like,
it's the dumbest version of downfall. Like, it's just like everyone's too afraid to disagree with the guy, but it's like what's he gonna do? Like,
it's so fucking fun. Like, I have to imagine, like, now, like, what the fuck is... Okay, because in Jason Goes to Hell, the Final Friday, there is, like, that FBI SWAT team that takes down Jason. They lure Jason to an ambush because they're like, we gotta fucking stop this guy from killing half the country at this point in the franchise. What is Trump's response to Jason Voorhees? Like, the supernatural Jason Voorhees existence, you know?
It really depends on what happens, right? Like, it's like, it depends on who he kills, when he kills them, and, like, just, like, how, like, I mean, let's say if the FBI took Jason down, but, like, Trump and the FBI were, like, feuding, like, the whole time he was, like, in his administration. So, like, Trump might take the side of Jason. Like... I don't know much about him. I heard he's a big fan of mine, but those camp counselors, they had it coming. I mean, what are these kids having sex for? Like,
the camp counselors are not bringing their best. They're bringing their drugs. They're bringing their women.
Some of them, I'm sure, are good people, but
that Tommy Jarvis, I like that Tommy.
Tommy Jarvis, troubled kid. You see him? He's weird. Like, once he's a sick puppy, we gotta do something about him. Remember when he said that to, like, the survivor of the Parkland shooting?
Yeah, that was fucking... How have all of us just not, like, collectively fallen into psychosis?
Well, I think it's weird where, like...
You think we did?
Lately it feels... No, well, yeah, I mean, like, I think that happened. That happened, like, day 2. Like, we're, like, still, like, all out of our minds. But, it feels like... How do I say this? We're, like, there was, like, a huge stretch where, like, it wasn't funny at all, right? Like, we just couldn't, like, enjoy it because of how awful everything was. And we were just like, we just got to get through these 4 years. Like, we have to minimize the damage. And, like, literally everything bad that could have happened. Like, the only thing that didn't happen was him starting a war. Like,
yeah.
So it was just, like, it was so awful. And now it's like, I think we're far enough removed that we're starting to feel comfortable enough to, like, actually talk about it and laugh a little bit about it, which is insane considering he's going to be the nominee. Like,
Well, I mean,
it feels like
we're talking about, like,
it feels
the Democrats feeling the need not to do anything. The Republicans have no idea what to do, frankly, and so he's just going to slot right in, and he's going to run. He's going to win the nomination.
But part of that is just that, like, how do you, like, the Republicans cannot keep the two parts of their party now they're both insane, but they're two different insane things, right? Like, and none of them, it's a weird thing that happens where, like, it might be the only thing that saves us from this disinformation era, which is that at a certain point, like, disinformation, it ends up fucking the people that spread it themselves, right? Like, we do need information. We do need actual, for real science. You can only go so far with a conspiracy theory because it doesn't actually have any practical effect on the world. And the Republicans just don't know how to square any sort of economic policy with the insane conspiracy theories they've aligned themselves with. And I think it's also like January 6th freaked a lot of people out. And it's weird. I don't know. I don't know what happens next. It does feel like, just based on a lot of the other stuff, that it feels like enough of the country is done with Trump that like his nomination will only really work for the party. But that's how it felt in 2016. So it's really one of those things where you just have to hope Joe Biden doesn't do something fucking insane between now and the election, right? Like that's really what it comes down to. Do something insane or die. Like you can't do either thing. But thankfully, all the stuff that keeps happening with him just makes him look cooler. Like where it's like his dog is attacking people. Like that's hysterical. Like,
yeah, I think the dogs are being framed.
Yeah.
I firmly believe there is a problem in the White House, and it's because Chucky's in the White House this season. On Sci-Fi's and Peacock's Chucky season 3.
Why not? That'd be a good twist. House of Chucky.
No, that is actually the plot of Chucky this year.
Oh, really? All right.
I'm sorry for spoiling that. Yeah.
No, I'm just behind. That sounds great.
Yeah, no. It's because they gave it away in the trailer, but I just know there are people out there that like didn't see it because they don't promote a lot of stuff at Sci-Fi, whatever. The opening scene is like a kid being calmed down. It's like, oh, Chucky's with this new kid now. How'd he get there? They pull out from the window, and it's like the hero shot of Chucky in the White House, and it was genuinely amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah. I don't know how it happened yet.
Might be the perfect film about the Trump administration.
It honestly might be, yeah. Jason Goes to Hell.
Yeah.
Bad movie.
There's a lot of good violence in this, oddly, even though Jason's barely in it. The guy who made it like seems to be oddly proud of what he did, which is just kind of interesting. Like, because I feel like it doesn't have a great reputation.
Mm-hmm.
It's we get the guy Duke who like hunts Jason. What a strange film. This one's really weird. Like I don't even know how to approach it really.
No. I do think it's bad, but this is one of the ones that's bad, and like you kind of do need to see this one for yourself.
Yeah, because it's like you're like, Jason's a worm in that one, and you're like, what?
Yeah. It's like no, really, like a David Cronenberg body horror situation a little bit.
Yeah, he's genuinely a worm. But hey.
Yeah. Speaking of
obviously,
David
the next step is to go to space, thanks to David Cronenberg.
Yes. But first, we should mention that Jason X only happens because they were trying to get that Freddy vs. Jason movie off the ground. In between that, because it's 10 years, I think, between Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X.
Mm-hmm.
And people fall out of love with the franchise.
Well, also the gap between Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X is that Jason X sat on the shelf for like 2 years. Like it's a weird one where they made it, and then I think who was it, Mike DeLuca at New Line like finally left the company, and he was like kind of the only one that actually liked the horror stuff. And so the new management like didn't know what to do with it, and they kind of just like let it sit there. David Cronenberg's in this movie, and he gets killed.
Yeah, he is. He's in the opening scene of the movie. And that's because, for people that don't know, it was directed by James Isaac, who was his special effects guy, and he actually started on Return of the Jedi in the creature department. And so, a bona fide sci-fi guy, really.
What other, like, Cronenberg, because he's in this, he's in Nightbreed. What other performances has Cronenberg given?
He's in Star Trek Discovery Season 3. I have not seen that, but I heard he's in it. He's also a really fun, creepy doctor in one season of Alias. He's really fun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Alias had some incredible guest stars, even when it wasn't very good, like kind of falls off in the middle. Cronenberg kind of crushes it.
He's
in that.
actually like a totally solid actor. Like,
yeah.
He can totally do it. Like Nightbreed would fall apart if he didn't work in it, like
a little, yeah.
Like he's a very important part of that movie. And he's fun in this. Like, and it's just kind of crazy that like and this is an era where it feels like he is trying to pivot into a more respectable direction, right? And it's like, but he'll still do a cameo in Jason X, like, which, that's kind of fun to think about.
Between Jason X, he does Existenz and Spider. I think that's like the perfect pivot.
Yeah. And it feels like the last kind of gasp of like the older Cronenberg before we get into like History of Violence era Cronenberg, like History of Violence, Eastern Promises, Dangerous Method, like those movies.
Yeah. Did you ever see Crimes of the Future?
I still haven't seen it. I keep like meaning to, and I just don't for some reason.
You got a good one ahead of you.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know why. Like I have so many fucking movies on the list to watch.
Yeah.
And then it's also like, and there are also movies where I'm also like, is it gonna ruin my night? Like, there's always a fair chance with a movie like that where like I enjoy it, but it also fucks my night up. But also like sometimes a movie will fuck my night up, and I'll be like, fuck yeah. So like Cronenberg could go either way.
I came out buzzing from that one. I think it's one of his best movies, honestly.
All right.
But yes, Jason X is not one of his best movies. What is your take on Jason X?
I wish it's the same thing. I wish it was better, which is how I kind of feel about a lot of these movies, right? Like, it's like Jason in Space. It should just be better than it is. Now, it's not terrible. I don't hate it.
No.
But
I will say this. This movie is kind of dog shit. But you will never, ever see a mainstream franchise commit to utter batshit insanity like this ever again.
Yeah.
Like, they sincerely, unironically are like, yeah, we're taking them to space. And to their credit, I think they commit pretty hard to that premise.
They commit pretty hard. The only thing I really brush up against is like the weird self-referential humor that like it feels like post-Scream, some fucking producer somewhere was like, be more meta.
Yeah. It worked in Jason Friday 6. It works less so here. I do get a real kick out of this movie. And I think I'm incredibly appreciative of it existing. This is the one where I'm like, you guys don't understand how far off the rails this franchise goes. This is the reason people make fun of they're going to space now, you know? This is where everyone gets that from. If Friday the 13th has taught me anything, it's that the history of slasher franchises as a whole is wrapped up in these first 10 movies. It's, the first Friday the 13th is where you get the camping slasher tropes from. By the end of that 10 film franchise run, it's, you go all the way to space. They do it all. They truly do everything in these movies. Now, do they do them any good? Not often. Not often at all. But Jason X is the one that just sticks with me because it is like, there's nothing else like this level of committal from a mainstream horror franchise. There's like Leprechaun 4 in space, which is even worse.
A lot of the other they go to space movies just kind of suck though. Like they're just kind of boring. Like this one's actually at least a little fun.
I think it's honestly pretty fun. I think I called it the Sistine Chapel of dog shit on my Letterboxd review, and I honestly, I'll just read out what I wrote. It's a Sistine Chapel of dog shit, a once-in-a-lifetime film made of buffoonery and hysterical commitment to the franchise's worn-thin bits. David Cronenberg is in this, and the cheap horniness of every character is very funny. Every character is so fucking horny in this. Remembering that this one was in Space Future, so they couldn't do a scene at Camp Crystal Lake is really funny, because then they have to make specifically a scene for a hologram Crystal Lake for Jason to beat topless co-eds to death against a tree in virtual reality. It was released to the public. This was not a straight-to-video movie. This was released to the general public of planet Earth. I hope every slasher gets to this point. I truly do. And I think we should be thankful that something like this could exist. So
There's a
fan.
novelization of this movie.
What? I'm gonna buy that right now.
Yeah, there's actually a whole series of Jason X books.
Jason X.
That are, I guess, sequels.
Novelization. Oh, there's sequels to Jason X?
Yeah, Jason X the Experiment, Jason X
What?
the End of the Beast. Yeah.
Maybe this is how I get like truly into the Friday movies. I just read the sequels to Jason X. Oh,
there's a movie called called Death Moon.
I found the paperback on eBay of Jason X. It is $650, so I will not be buying this after all.
Wow. Wow.
Never mind. Oh, I found another copy on Amazon for $1,599.97.
Okay then.
Never mind. Goodbye, Jonathan Demme.
Goodbye, Judy Foster. It looks like it looks like they the Jason X novels are on the Internet Archive.
I just saw that link right now. I'm downloading as we speak. I will report back at the next retrospective.
All right, right on. Give it a shot, Diego.
Thank you.
I
know
like
I've
the
lost
robot
everyone's
lady.
respect tonight after this, but I don't care.
I like KM14.
The horny robot?
Yeah, she's fun.
Is it because she's a horny robot? You can be honest with me.
You know, it's honestly, it's not the horror thing. Like, it's funny when like her head gets knocked off and she's like chill about it.
Oh,
like,
yeah, that is funny. Yes,
I get it. That's the stuff I like. I do like robots. Like that, I've been very open about liking robots, but it's not honestly the weird. Like, there's like the scene with her boobs. Like that's just weird. Like it's not really like engaging at all. Like.
Mm-hmm.
It's but I like the nonchalant robot like in the face of like horror, just kind of being like chill about it type thing.
Yeah.
Which I just find very funny.
Yeah, I want to shout out Peter Mensah, who plays Sergeant Brodsky, who is actually genuinely pretty badass in this. Like all the characters are just kind of fodder, and you know some of the kills are really fun, like the liquid nitrogen face smash.
Yeah, the famous, which is one of the best kills probably in the series.
Yeah, honestly, that might be my number 2 after the guy getting his head punched off in Jason 7. Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yeah.
Because that one actually, the effects and everything are like fantastic on it. Jason gets like rebuilt as a cyborg with nanites. Like this is what I mean. Like it's such like a. Like, it does commit to the weird sci-fi, so it's like, okay, this is space future. What can we do? He's got a super space machete, and he's got, like, I don't know, there's a robot and all this shit.
He's Uber Jason now.
Yeah. It's like... yeah, so I fuck with this one. It is one of the stupidest films ever made.
Yeah.
That's kind of it.
I mean, that could go for about half this franchise, frankly.
But this one, I do think it works more than most. And as we wind down, we kind of, I don't think we have to spend that much time on the last two, but let's talk about them anyways, because otherwise, I'm just going to be gushing about the stupidity of Jason X.
I think Freddy versus Jason, though, is kind of important for our era, because that was kind of a big deal when that happened, right?
Yeah.
Like.
This is how you get the Avengers. I'm not even joking.
Mm-hmm. No, it's 100% coming to this. Like, it's embarrassing it took as long as it did to get the movie made, like, famously. And it's sad that this is the last outing of, like, the original canon version of these characters. Especially because it was, like, such a hit when it came out, too, so...
yeah, I don't know why they stopped. I assume it was a rights thing why they stopped, right?
It was how much this movie made. This movie made $116 million on a $30 million budget.
That's pretty good.
And hold on one second. And the same year, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake came out and made $107 million on a $10 million budget. So that's your answer, which is that the lower budget remake thing.
Yeah.
And that's 100% what did it. So.
Yeah. I mean, the Friday 13th movies were never particularly scary. Freddy vs. Jason is literally like, you're watching this movie to watch people get fucking beat down. You know, like...
Yeah.
You're going like it's a fucking boxing match.
I do think it's hysterical that, like, they talk about, like, all the different... Like, how difficult it was to get a good script for this movie. And they hit... What they end up doing is honestly, like, the best idea, but it's also the simplest, which is just, like... Freddy uses Jason to, like, kill people, to bring back his memory, but then Jason goes too far. Like, that's the setup.
Yeah.
And it's a really good setup, but it's, like, it's hysterical it took him that long to hit on that idea. This movie's directed by Ronnie Yu.
Yes!
Who had just done Bride of Chucky before this. A big, he's bigger over in China.
Yeah,
I can't remember, what's the movie he did that kind of got I can't remember. There's one movie he did before this that's what basically got him the job. They were like he was but I can't remember which one of his movies it was.
There's something called The 51st State, which is not one of his Chinese productions, I don't think.
Yeah. Because that wouldn't make sense in China.
No.
that title.
Okay, yes. I think he kind of started blowing up over here in the States with something called The Bride with White Hair. I don't know if you've
I
seen
think
that.
That's what it is. Yeah, it's his wuxia film, stuff like that. That era where that stuff was still kind of big.
Yeah, and you kind of, like, if you read, like, even on Letterboxd, like, reviews of his stuff, everyone's like, yeah, it looks great, but it's kind of thin, like, narratively. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of his thing, but, like,
yeah,
I don't know, he's a good stylistic director. Like, I think Bride of Chucky looks amazing, and I think Freddy vs. Jason, like, when it works, when it's doing this set piece stuff, like, it does look terrific.
Yeah. And I actually think he has fairly good instincts, even though, like, I know some fans kind of brush up against some of the, like, the canon stuff he ignores, right? Like,
yeah, if you're that upset about this stuff, it's Freddy vs. Jason. Like,
I do kind of understand the people getting annoyed at the fact that they turned Jason's weakness into being water. Like, I kind of get why people find that one a little annoying, right? Like,
I guess.
Like, half the movies he jumps into the lake. Like, it's not going to be his biggest issue, right? Like, like, I get drowning, but, like, just water in general, I get, like, why some people might brush up against that one. And I guess it's just that thing that normally happens with these type of movies where, like, you always wish there was, like, more of them fighting. You wish, and there's also the thing of people, like, you know, the reason we want a movie like Freddy vs. Jason is because we have the school ground argument of who would win in a fight. But of course, they're never going to actually have a winner. Like, you can't do it. Like, that's just not how it wouldn't work. But you know, so there's stuff like that.
Yeah. I'll say this: I got to watch every Nightmare on Elm Street movie in 2021 to raise funds for the Frida Cinema over in Orange County. Shout out to Trevor Dillon, friend of the show, programmer there. He organized that event to kind of reopen that theater as the pandemic slowed down for theater chains, at least. And I figured, like, fuck, we're ending with Freddy vs. Jason. Like, after New Nightmare, which is my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie, like, I worship that movie. I was like, God, that's going to be kind of a hard one to sit through. And I was pleasantly surprised with how much it held up as, like, for schlock, it's pretty good. It honestly is. It's a good time. I don't, like, ride or die for it or anything, but if it's on, like, I'll sit down and watch it for a bit.
Yeah, it does feel like one, like, I might, like, if I want to be, like, I want to represent Freddy and Jason for Halloween. How do I do it quickly? Like, throw Freddy vs. Jason on. Like, you kill two birds with one stone, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it looks good. The action holds up. Robert
I really
Englund
like
is really good and funny.
Mm-hmm. I really like the shot of Jason on fire in the cornfield. Like that's a really cool scene.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, it's England's kind of last hurrah, which it wasn't the intention, but that's just how it ended up being.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of cool that like he hung in so long to do it. And this movie is 20 years old now. So
Fucking don't say that.
It's we just passed the 20th anniversary of Freddy versus Jason, and yeah, it's so weird that like they just decided to reboot everything afterwards, especially when like basically everyone wanted to do a sequel, right? Like Ronnie Yu was even like, yeah, I'll do a sequel. He wanted to bring Michael Myers in. And his whole thing was like, I want to do the good, the bad, and the ugly with Freddy, Jason, and Michael Myers. And I'm like, the fuck does that mean? But like, it's and the other choice was obviously there was the talk of Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. They did have meetings with Sam Raimi. It never came to fruition, but it did get turned into a comic book, so you can go read that if you want to.
Yeah.
There's probably more we could talk about, but because of how we decided to do this, it is almost 1 a.m. over here for me.
Yes.
So
we will.
I'm definitely rushing through the last few movies. Apologies, but go fuck yourselves.
Yeah. That's fine. That's fine. Do you have any thoughts on the 2009 remake, and then we just end it?
Yeah, actually, it's a good movie. Like it's on the curve of Friday the 13th. It's actually fine. I don't know why it got such a negative reception. I think just because it was a remake, but it's just another Friday the 13th movie, right?
Yeah. I like this one too. Honestly, I think it looks great. Shot by the great Daniel Pearl from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, AVPR, the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, good cinematographer. Marcus Nispel seems to have vanished, unfortunately, after a couple box office bombs with stuff like the Conan the Barbarian remake, that movie Pathfinder, which is right before his Friday the 13th. But good eye for a director. I don't know why he went away, but.
Well, I know there was a lot of it was a troubled production apparently, but hey, it's a totally serviceable movie. It's fun.
Yeah. Shout out to Derek Mears who plays Jason Voorhees in this one.
I think people just rejected it because like they didn't want the series to get like remade, right? Like I think there was just people that love these movies want them to be sequels. They don't want remakes. Mm-hmm. And horror is one of the few genres where you can literally do a part 47 and people will still show up for it. So and I think it was just kind of rejected on principle. Hey, what's up with Aaron Yu? Remember that kid?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what's up?
He popped up and stuff.
He's in Disturbia, which is, I think when I remember him kind of noticing him. He's in the movie 21, which is that card counting movie. He's in Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, which is a movie. He does Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street. He has a cameo in Nightmare on Elm Street, and then. It's just kind of over almost immediately after that. What the hell happened there? And he was on the show The Tomorrow People, but it lasted only 2 years. I don't know what's going on. I guess it's just that it's got to be just a fucking Hollywood being racist thing and not knowing what to do with a non-white actor. But it feels like he should have. It felt like he was there was a ramp up happening, and then it's just over.
Yeah, that's too bad. Because he was he was a fun presence on screen, and he was in something called Wish Dragon, which is some animated movie. So
Never heard of it.
Well, it was released on Netflix, so that's why.
It's probably great then.
There's some good animated stuff on Netflix, so.
Yeah, and then they like abandoned it immediately.
I know. I'm not arguing for their betterment. I'm arguing for the film. But yeah, I don't know. Someone give that guy a comeback.
Yeah,
Good actor. In a good movie, because I also like the 2009 Friday. And that's it. Everything else has been wrapped up in rights issues. A potential Crystal Lake show in development. We will see what happens with that. It's a more complicated issue that we don't have time to get into.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there, but and the writer's strike might have kind of fucked it up. Yeah, it's weird. We're like that's clearly a byproduct of who owns what part of the franchise, right? Like someone must own the Crystal Lake thing, but not Jason.
Yeah.
So that's why
allegedly, also everything would be on the table for that. And when Matt says "fucked up by the writer's strike," just so everyone knows, that they're talking about how the studios are going to respond to the writer's strike and the writers winning what they deserved.
No.
Yeah.
I am not angry at the writers for a project, not for a fucking Crystal Lake TV show not happening. Like, I'm just, it's just what happens. Unfortunately, it's like when these strikes happen, a lot of projects get canceled. I'm not losing any sleep over it. Like, I would rather people get paid a living wage than get a fucking another show based on some fucking thing I grew up with, right? Like, that's better. Although then like when the Raiders strike started, like George R. R. Martin like made that blog post where he was like, "Yeah, Warner Brothers canceled like my entire deal with them." Like he was like developing shows for them. Is that just like all dead now? Like, are they not even gonna reverse that?
Yeah,
like,
I think so.
That's crazy because he was actually developing a lot of interesting stuff that was like supposed to be for more people, but but man, fuck Warner Brothers.
Well, they're not making many people happy right now. Just want to say thanks for doing this Halloween special with me, Matt. I know it's been a strange time recording this one. We had to do it at a weird schedule, weirder than usual. Thank you for accommodating.
Well, we had to get it done. So
yeah, but also this was fun to talk about, even though we didn't really like the movies mostly.
Yeah, you know what though? But it was a weird one where like I was definitely down on them more. But like I said, like kind of like right around 6, it kind of clicked for me, and I did start enjoying them more. Even if I'm not gonna come out of here being like, I don't feel comfortable really saying I'm a fan of the franchise. Just like I feel like that'd be a little disingenuous, but I turned around on it basically, and watching it was kind of one of those where like, goddamn, someone just fucking do this shit right, like do another one of these and just do something insane. Like, it's been a while, like we're totally overdue for Jason to come back and just fucking fuck up some teenagers. Like, we're just overdue for it. So why not? Don't try to do like any social commentary with it. Just fucking have him come back and just fuck some people up. Like,
but if you want to do some social commentary and you got an idea, go for that too. You can literally do anything with this franchise, and I'd be like, yeah, give it a shot.
My idea would be like you would have someone doing one of the monologues from like Halloween Ends, and being like, the horror, it's spread and infected every one of us because maybe the true evil was inside, and like before the person could finish the monologue, Jason just fucking like stabs them through the eye. Like, that would be my one idea.
I would accept that as well.
So
yeah, Matt, thanks for joining me. Links down to our stuff below, unless you have anything else you want to plug.
No, go fuck yourselves.
All right, we'll see you next.
Have a happy Halloween, everyone. Oh, we're also doing this because we're hoping this will come out on Friday the 13th.
It will. So don't worry about that. Just gotta squeeze in some editing at lunch.
I'm sure someone would wish they had a movie to actually release for Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th in October is a kind of rare thing.
I know
But,
what a fucking dumb world we live in. How fucking hard is it to make one of these? You know, we just talked about how they pump these out for years on years.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, like it's also like I get it if like the rights are kind of fucked up, but like, fucking get your shit together, man. Like,
I know. Money's not real.
Yeah, money's not real. It might be like one of those things where like, isn't like the fucking Evangelion, like, isn't there like a whole issue with that where like basically, it's so divided, like it's not worth it for anyone to actually put the thing out, like, because like no one will make any money. But
that might be it, honestly. But
like it's like the pie is just divided too much that no one feels satisfied. But hey. I think it's I don't know. It's hopefully something will happen because I would love to see Jason come back.
Yeah, same here. Fingers crossed. Honestly, I really hope it works out, and there's more Jason stuff in the future.
Yes.
But until then, like and subscribe if you like this episode. If you didn't like this episode, like and subscribe anyways because you might find something you do like. We're finishing up the Fail Blockbusters Retrospective Season 3. We will be taking a break after that, and then we will return with something. We talked about what we want to do next, and I think we've settled on it, but...
we got a few ideas.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Definitely Failed War Contenders will be coming back at some point, and yeah, we'll keep you all posted. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We have been professionally unprofessional.
Ted! Hey, Ted!